Chapter 13. The Sunny Side. "I've won the wager, Tom."
"Didn't know there was one."
"Don't you remember you said Polly would be tired of her teaching and give it up in 3 months, and I said she wouldn't?"
"Well, isn't she?"
"Not a bit of it. I thought she was at one time and expected every day to have her come in with a long face and say she couldn't stand it. But somehow lately she is always bright and happy, seems to like her work, and don't have the tired, worried look she used to at first. The 3 months are out, so pay up, Tommy."
"All right, what will you have?"
"You may make it gloves. I always need them, and Papa looks sober when I want money." There was a minute's pause as Fan returned to her practicing, and Tom relapsed into the reverie he was enjoying seated astride of a chair with his chin on his folded arms.
"Seems to me Polly don't come here as often as she used to," he said presently.
"No, she seems to be very busy. Got some new friends, I believe. Old ladies, sewing girls, and things like that. I miss her, but know she'll get tired of being goody and will come back to me before long."
"Don't be too sure of that, ma'am."
Something in Tom's tone made Fan turn round and ask, "What do you mean?"
"Well, it strikes me that Sydney is one of Polly's new friends. Haven't you observed that she is uncommonly jolly, and don't that sort of thing account for it?"
"Nonsense," said Fanny sharply.
"Hope it is," coolly returned Tom.
"What put that into your head?" demanded Fanny, twirling round again so that her face was hidden.
"Oh, well, I keep meeting Sid and Polly circulating in the same directions. She looks as if she had found something uncommonly nice, and he looks as if all creation was getting Pollyfied pretty rapidly. Wonder you haven't observed it."
"I have." It was Tom's turn to look surprised now, for Fanny's voice sounded strange to him. He looked at her steadily for a minute, but saw only a rosy ear and a bent head. A cloud passed over his face, and he leaned his chin on his arm again with a despondent whistle, as he said to himself, "Poor Fan, both of us in a scrape at once." "Don't you think it would be a good thing?" asked Fanny, after playing a bar or two very badly.
"Yes, for Sid."
"Not for Polly? Why, he's rich and clever and better than most of you good-for-nothing fellows. What can the girl expect?"
"Can't say, but I don't fancy the match myself."
"Don't be a dog in the manger, Tom."
"Bless your little heart, I only take a brotherly sort of interest in Polly. She's a capital girl, and she ought to marry a missionary or one of your reformer fellows, and be a shining light of some sort. I don't think setting up for a fine lady would suit her."
"I think it would, and I hope she'll have the chance," said Fanny, evidently making an effort to speak kindly.
"Good for you, Fan."
And Tom gave an emphatic nod, as if her words meant more than she suspected.
"Mind you," he added, "I don't know anything, and only fancied there might be some little flirtation going on. But I dare say it's nothing."
"Time will show."
Then Fan began to sing, and Tom's horse came, so he departed with the very unusual demonstration of a gentle pat on the head, as he said kindly, "That's right, my dear, keep jolly." It wasn't an elegant way of expressing sympathy, but it was hearty, and Fan thanked him for it, though she only said, "Don't break your neck, Tommy." When he was gone, Fan's song ended as suddenly as it began, and she sat thinking, with varying expressions of doubt and trouble passing rapidly across her face. "Well, I can't do anything but wait," she said at last, slamming the music book together with a desperate look. "Yes, I can," she added a minute after. "It's Polly's holiday. I can go and see her, and if there is anything in it, I shall find it out." Fanny dropped her face into her hands with a little shiver as she said that, then got up, looking as pale and resolute as if going to meet some dreadful doom, and putting on her things, went away to Polly's as fast as her dignity would allow.
Saturday morning was Polly's clearing up day, and Fan found her with a handkerchief tied over her head and a big apron on, just putting the last touches to the tidy little room, which was as fresh and bright as water, air, and a pair of hands could make it. "All ready for company. I'll just whisk off my regimentals, and Polly the maid becomes Polly the missus. It was lovely of you to come early. Take off your things. Another new bonnet, you extravagant wretch! How is your mother and Maudie? It's a nice day, and we'll have a walk, won't we?" By the time Polly's welcome was uttered, she had got Fan on the little sofa beside her, and was smiling at her in such an infectious manner that Fan couldn't help smiling back. "I came to see what you've been doing with yourself lately. You don't come and report, and I got anxious about you," said Fanny, looking into the clear eyes before her. "I've been so busy, and I knew you wouldn't care to hear about my doings, for they aren't the sort you like," answered Polly. "Your lessons didn't used to take up all your time. It's my private opinion that you are taking as well as giving lessons, miss," said Fan, putting on a playfully stern air to hide her real anxiety. "Yes, I am," answered Polly soberly. "In what, love?" A quick color came to Polly's cheeks as she laughed and said, looking away, "No, friendship and good works." "Oh, indeed. May I ask who is your teacher?" "I've more than one, but Miss Mills is the head teacher." "She instructs in good works. Who gives the friendship lessons?" "Such pleasant girls. I wish you knew them, Fan. So clever and energetic and kind and happy. It always does me good to see them," cried Polly with a face full of enthusiasm. "Is that all?" And Fan gave her a curious look of mingled disappointment and relief. "There! I told you my doings would not interest you, and they don't. They sound flat and prosy after your brilliant adventures. Let's change the subject," said Polly, looking relieved herself. "Dear me, which of our sweethearts sends us dainty bouquets of violets so early in the morning?" asked Fanny, suddenly spying the purple cluster in a graceful little vase on the piano. "He sends me one every week. He knows I love them so." And Polly's eyes turned that way full of pride and pleasure. "I'd no idea he was so devoted," said Fanny, stooping to smell the flowers and at the same time read a card that lay near them. "You needn't plague me about it now you know. I never speak of our fondness for one another because such things seem silly to other people. Will isn't all that Jimmy was to me, but he tries to be, and I love him dearly for it." "Will!" Fanny's voice quite startled Polly. It was so sharp and sudden, and her face grew red and pale all in a minute as she upset the little vase with the start she gave. "Yes, of course. Who did you think I meant?" asked Polly, sopping up the water before it damaged her piano. "Never mind. I thought you might be having a quiet little flirtation with somebody. I feel responsible, you know, because I told your mother I'd look after you. The flowers are all right. My head aches so I hardly know what I'm doing this morning." Fanny spoke fast and laughed uncomfortably as she went back to the sofa, wondering if Polly had told her a lie. Polly seemed to guess at her thoughts as she saw the little card, and turning toward her she held it up, saying with a conscious look in her eyes, "You thought Mr. Sidney sent them? Well, you are mistaken, and the next time you want to know anything, please ask straight out. I like it better than talking at cross purposes." "Now, my dear, don't be angry. I was only teasing you in fun. Tom took it into his foolish head that something was going on, and I felt a natural interest, you know." "Tom, what does he know or care about my affairs?" demanded Polly. "He met you two in the street pretty often, and being in a sentimental mood himself, got up a romance for you and Sidney. I'm much obliged to him for his interest, but it's quite wasted, thank you." Fan's next proceeding gave her friend another surprise, for being rather ashamed of herself, very much relieved, and quite at a loss what to say, she took refuge in a hysterical fit of tears, which changed Polly's anger into tenderness at once. "Is that the trouble she's been hiding all winter? Poor dear, I wish I'd known it sooner,"
thought Polly, as she tried to soothe her with comfortable pats, sniffs of cologne, and sympathizing remarks upon the subject of headache, carefully ignoring that other feminine affliction, the heartache. "There, I feel better. I've been needing a good cry for some time, and now I shall be all right. Never mind it, Polly. I'm nervous and tired. I've danced too much lately, and dyspepsia makes me blue." And Fanny wiped her eyes and laughed. "Of course it does. You need rest and petting, and here I've been scolding you when I ought to have been extra kind. Now tell me what I can do for you," said Polly with a remorseful face. "Talk to me, and tell me all about yourself. You don't seem to have as many worries as other people. What's the secret, Polly?" And Fan looked up with wet eyes and a wistful face at Polly, who was putting little dabs of cologne all over her head. "Well," said Polly slowly, "I just try to look on the bright side of things. That helps one amazingly. Why, you've no idea how much goodness and sunshine you can get out of the most unpromising things if you make the best of them." "I don't know how," said Fan despondently. "You can learn. I did. I used to croak and fret dreadfully and get so unhappy I wasn't fit for anything. I do it still more than I ought, but I try not to, and it gets easier, I find. Get atop of your troubles and then they are half cured, Miss Mills says." "Everything is so contrary and provoking," said Fanny petulantly. "Now what in the world have you to fret about?" asked Polly rather anxiously. "Quantities of things," began Fan, and then stopped, for somehow she felt ashamed to own that she was afflicted because she couldn't have a new set of furs, go to Paris in the spring, and make Mr. Sidney love her. She hunted up something more presentable and said in a despairing tone, "Well, Mother is very poorly. Tom and Trix quarrel all the time. Maud gets more and more willful every day, and Papa is worried about his affairs." "A sad state of things, but nothing very desperate. Can't you lend a hand anywhere? That might do good all round." "No, I haven't the talent for managing people, but I see what ought to be done." "Well, don't wail about it. Keep yourself happy if you can. It will help other people to see you cheerful." "Just what Tom said, keep jolly. But dear me, how can one when everything is so stupid and tiresome?" "If ever a girl needed work, it's you," cried Polly. "You began to be a young lady so early that you're tired of everything at 22. I wish you'd go at something, then you'd find how much talent and energy you really had. I know ever so many girls who are just like me, sick to death of fashionable life, but don't know what to take in its place. I'd like to travel, but Papa says he can't afford it, so I can only drag about and get on as I may. I pity you rich girls so much. You have so many opportunities and don't seem to know how to use them. I suppose I should do just the same in your place, but it seems now as if I could be very happy and useful with plenty of money." "You are that without it. There, I won't croak any more. Let us go and take a good walk, and don't you tell anyone how I came and cried like a baby." "Never," said Polly, putting on her bonnet. "I ought to go and make calls," said Fanny, "but I don't feel now as if I ever wanted to see any of the girls again. Dreadful state of mind, isn't it?" "Suppose you come and see some of my friends instead. They are not fine or ceremonious, but lively, odd, and pleasant. Come, it will amuse you." "I will," cried Fanny, whose spirits seemed improved by the shower. "Nice little old lady, isn't she?" added Fan, as she caught sight of Miss Mills on their way out, sitting at a table piled with work and sewing away with an energy that made the gray curls vibrate. "Saint Mehitable, I call her. Now there is a rich woman who knew how to get happiness out of her money," said Polly, as they walked away. "She was poor till she was nearly 50, then a comfortable fortune was left her, and she knew just how to use it. That house was given her, but instead of living in it all alone, she filled it with poor gentlefolks who needed neat, respectable homes, but couldn't get anything comfortable for their little money. I'm one of them, and I know the worth of what she does for me. 2 old widow ladies live below me, several students overhead.
Poor Mrs. Keene and her lame boy have the back parlor, and Jenny the little bedroom next to Miss Mills. Each pays what they can. That's independent and makes us feel better, but the dear woman does 1,000 things that money can't pay for, and we feel her influence all through the house. I'd rather be married and have a home of my own, but next to that, I should like to be an old maid like Miss Mills." Polly's sober face and emphatic tone made Fanny laugh, and at the cheery sound a young girl pushing a baby carriage looked round and smiled. "What lovely eyes!" whispered Fanny. "Yes, that's little Jane," returned Polly, adding when she had passed with a nod and a friendly, "Don't get tired, Jenny." "We help one another at our house, and every fine morning Jenny takes Johnny Keene out when she goes for her own walk. That gives his mother time to rest, does both the children good, and keeps things neighborly. Miss Mills suggested it, and Jenny is so glad to do anything for anybody, it's a pleasure to let her." "I've heard of Miss Mills before, but I should think she would get tired to death sitting there making hoods and petticoats day after day," said Fanny, after thinking over Jenny's story for a few minutes, for seeing the girl seemed to bring it nearer and make it more real to her. "But she doesn't just sit there all the time. People come to her with their troubles, and she goes to them with all sorts of help, from soap and soup to shrouds for the dead and comfort for the living. I go with her sometimes, and it is more exciting than any play to see and hear the lives and stories of the poor." "How can you bear the dreadful sights and sounds, the bad air, and the poverty that can't be cured?" "But it isn't all dreadful. There are good and lovely things among them if one only has eyes to see them. It makes me grateful and contented, shows me how rich I am, and keeps me ready to do all I can for these poor souls." "My good Polly," and Fanny gave her friend's arm an affectionate squeeze, wondering if it was this alone that had worked the change in Polly. "You have seen 2 of my new friends, Miss Mills and Jenny. Now I'll show you 2 more," said Polly presently, as they reached a door, and she led the way up several flights of public stairs. "Rebecca Jeffrey is a regularly splendid girl, full of talent. She won't let us call it genius. She will be famous some day, I know. She is so modest and yet so intent on her work. Lizzie Small is an engraver, and designs the most delightful little pictures. Becky and she live together and take care of one another in true Damon and Pythias style. This studio is their home. They work, eat, sleep, and live here, going halves in everything. They are all alone in the world, but as happy and independent as birds, real friends, whom nothing will part. Let a lover come between them, and their friendship won't last long," said Fanny. "I think it will. Take a look at them, and you'll change your mind," answered Polly, tapping at a door on which 2 modest cards were tacked. "Come in," said a voice, and obeying, Fanny found herself in a large, queerly furnished room, lighted from above, and occupied by 2 girls. One stood before a great clay figure in a corner. This one was tall, with a strong face, keen eyes, short curly hair, and a fine head. Fanny was struck at once by this face and figure, though the one was not handsome, and the other half hidden by a great pinafore covered with clay. At a table where the light was clearest sat a frail-looking girl, with a thin face, big eyes, and pale hair, a dreamy, absorbed little person who bent over a block, skillfully wielding her tools. "Becky and Bess, how do you do? This is my friend Fanny Shaw. We are out on a rampage, so go on with your work and let us lazy ones look on and admire." As Polly spoke, both girls looked up and nodded smilingly. Bess gave Fan the one easy chair. Becky took an artistic survey of the newcomer with eyes that seemed to see everything. Then each went on with her work, and all began to talk. "You are just what I want, Polly. Pull up your sleeve and give me an arm while you sit. The muscles here aren't right, and you've got just what I want," said Becky, slapping the round arm of the statue at which Fan was gazing with awe. "How do you get on?" asked Polly, throwing off her cloak and rolling up her sleeves as if going to washing. "Slowly. The idea is working itself clear, and I follow as fast as my hands can. Is the face better, do you think?" said Becky, taking off a wet cloth and showing the head of the statue. "How beautiful it is!"
cried Fanny, staring at it with increased respect. "What does it mean to you?" asked Rebecca, turning to her with a sudden shine in her keen eyes.
"I don't know whether it is meant for a saint or a muse, a goddess or a fate, but to me it is only a beautiful woman, bigger, lovelier, and more imposing than any woman I ever saw," answered Fanny slowly, trying to express the impression the statue made upon her. Rebecca smiled brightly, and Bess looked round to nod approvingly, but Polly clapped her hands and said, "Well done, Fan. I didn't think you'd get the idea so well, but you have, and I'm proud of your insight. Now I'll tell you, for Becky will let me, since you have paid her the compliment of understanding her work. Some time ago we got into a famous talk about what women should be, and Becky said she'd show us her idea of the coming woman. There she is, as you say, bigger, lovelier, and more imposing than any we see nowadays, and at the same time she is a true woman. See what a fine forehead, yet the mouth is both firm and tender, as if it could say strong, wise things, as well as teach children and kiss babies. We couldn't decide what to put in the hand as the most appropriate symbol. What do you say?" "Give her a scepter, she would make a fine queen," answered Fanny. "No, we've had enough of that. Women have been called queens a long time, but the kingdom given them isn't worth ruling," answered Rebecca. "I don't think it is nowadays," said Fanny with a tired sort of sigh. "Put a man's hand in hers to help her along, then," said Polly, whose happy fortune it had been to find friends and helpers in father and brothers. "No, my woman is to stand alone and help herself," said Rebecca decidedly. "She's to be strong-minded, is she?" And Fanny's lip curled a little as she uttered the misused words. "Yes, strong-minded, strong-hearted, strong-souled, and strong-bodied. That is why I made her larger than the miserable, pinched-up woman of our day. Strength and beauty must go together. Don't you think these broad shoulders can bear burdens without breaking down? These hands work well, these eyes see clearly, and these lips do something besides simper and gossip?" Fanny was silent, but a voice from Bess's corner said, "Put a child in her arms, Becky." "Not even that, for she is to be something more than a nurse." "Give her a ballot box," cried a new voice, and turning round they saw an odd-looking woman perched on a sofa behind them. "Thank you for the suggestion, Kate. I'll put that with the other symbols at her feet, for I'm going to have needle, pen, palette, and broom somewhere to suggest the various talents she owns, and the ballot box will show that she has earned the right to use them. How goes it?" And Rebecca offered a clay-daubed hand, which the newcomer cordially shook. "Great news, girls! Anna is going to Italy!" cried Kate, tossing up her bonnet like a schoolboy. "Oh, how splendid! Who takes her? Has she had a fortune left her? Tell all about it!" exclaimed the girls, gathering round the speaker. "Yes, it is splendid. Just one of the beautiful things that does everybody heaps of good. It's so generous and so deserved. You know Anna has been longing to go, working and hoping for a chance and never getting it, till all of a sudden Miss Burton is inspired to invite the girl to go with her for several years to Italy. Think of the luck of that dear soul, the advantages she'll have, the good it will do her, and best of all, the lovely way in which it comes to her. Miss Burton wants her as a friend, asks nothing of her but her company, and Anna will go through fire and water for her, of course. Now isn't that fine?" It was good to see how heartily these girls sympathized in their comrade's good fortune. Polly danced all over the room, Bess and Becky hugged one another, and Kate laughed with her eyes full, while even Fanny felt a glow of pride and pleasure at the kind act. "Who is that?" she whispered to Polly, who had subsided into a corner. "Why, it is Kate King, the authoress. Bless me, how rude not to introduce you. Here, my king is an admirer of yours, Fanny Shaw, and my well-beloved friend," cried Polly, presenting Fan, who regarded the shabby young woman with as much respect as if she had been arrayed in velvet and ermine, for Kate had written a successful book by accident, and happened to be the fashion just then. "It's time for lunch, girls, and I brought mine along with me. It's so much jollier to eat in sisterhood. Let's club together and have a revel," said Kate, producing a bag of oranges and several big plummy buns. "We've got sardines, crackers, and cheese," said Bess, clearing off a table with all speed. "Wait a bit, and I'll add my share," cried Polly, and catching up her cloak, she ran off to the grocery store nearby. "You'll be shocked at our performances, Miss Shaw, but you can call it a picnic, and never tell what dreadful things you saw us do," said Rebecca, polishing a paint knife by rubbing it up and down in a pot of ivy, while Kate spread forth the feast in several odd plates and a flat shell or two. "Let us have coffee to finish off with. Put on the pot, Bess, and skim the milk," added Becky, as she produced cups, mugs, and a queer little vase to supply drinking vessels for the party. "Here's nuts, a pot of jam, and some cake. Fan likes sweet things, and we want to be elegant when we have company," said Polly, flying in again and depositing her share on the table. "Now then, fall to, ladies, and help yourselves. Never mind if the china don't hold out. Take the sardines by their little tails and wipe your fingers on my brown paper napkins," said Kate, setting the table with such a relish that the others followed it in a gale of merriment. Fanny had been to many elegant lunches, but never enjoyed one more than that droll picnic in the studio, for there was a freedom about it that was charming, an artistic flavor to everything, and such a spirit of goodwill and gaiety that she felt at home at once. As they ate, the others talked, and she listened, finding it as interesting as any romance to hear these young women discuss their plans, ambitions, successes, and defeats. It was a new world to her, and they seemed a different race of creatures from the girls whose lives were spent in dress, gossip, pleasure, or ennui. They were girls still, full of spirits, fun, and youth. But below the light-heartedness each cherished a purpose, which seemed to ennoble her womanhood, to give her a certain power, a sustaining satisfaction, a daily stimulus that led her on to daily effort, and in time to some success in circumstance or character, which was worth all the patience, hope, and labor of her life. Fanny was just then in the mood to feel the beauty of this, for the sincerest emotion she had ever known was beginning to make her dissatisfied with herself and the aimless life she led. "Men must respect such girls as these," she thought. "Yes, and love them too, for in spite of their independence they are womanly. I wish I had a talent to live for, if it would do as much for me as it does for them. It is this sort of thing that is improving Polly, that makes her society interesting to Sydney and herself so dear to everyone. Money can't buy these things for me, and I want them very much." As these sorts of things were passing through her mind, Fanny was hearing all sorts of topics discussed with feminine enthusiasm and frankness: art, morals, politics, society, books, religion, housekeeping, dress, and economy, for the minds and tongues roved from subject to subject with youthful rapidity, and seemed to get something from the driest and the dullest. "How does the new book come on?" asked Polly, sucking her orange in public with a composure which would have scandalized the good ladies of Cranford. "Better than it deserves. My children, beware of popularity. It is a delusion and a snare. It puffeth up the heart of man, and especially of woman. It blindeth the eyes to faults. It exalteth unduly the humble powers of the victim. It is apt to be capricious, and just as one gets to liking the taste of this intoxicating draught, it suddenly faileth, and one is left gasping, like a fish out of water." And Kate emphasized her speech by spearing a sardine with a penknife and eating it with a groan. "It won't hurt you much, I guess. You've worked and waited so long, a large dose will do you good," said Rebecca, giving her a generous spoonful of jam, as if eager to add as much sweetness as possible to a life that had not been an easy one. "When are you and Becky going to dissolve partnership?" asked Polly, eager for news of all. "Never. George knows he can't have one without the other, and has not suggested such a thing as parting us. There is always room in my house for Becky, and she lets me do as she would if she was in my place," answered Bess, with a look at her friend answered by a smile. "The lover won't separate this pair of friends, you see," whispered Polly to Fan. Bess is to be married in the spring, and Becky is to live with her. By the way, Polly, I've got some tickets for you. People are always sending me such things, and as I don't care for them, I'm glad to make them over to you young and giddy infants. There are passes for the statuary exhibition. Becky shall have those. Here are the concert tickets for you, my musical girl, and that is for a course of lectures on literature, which I'll keep for myself. As Kate dealt out the colored cards to the grateful girls, Fanny took a good look at her, wondering if the time would ever come when women could earn a little money and success without paying such a heavy price for them, for Kate looked sick, tired, and too early old. Then her eye went to the unfinished statue, and she said impulsively, "I hope you'll put that in marble and show us what we ought to be." "I wish I could," and an intense desire shone in Rebecca's face as she saw her faulty work, and felt how fair her model was. For a minute the 5 young women sat silent, looking up at the beautiful, strong figure before them, each longing to see it done, and each unconscious that she was helping, by her individual effort and experience, to bring the day when their noblest ideal of womanhood should be embodied in flesh and blood, not clay. The city bells rung 1, and Polly started up. "I must go, for I promised a neighbor of mine a lesson at 2. "I thought this was a holiday," said Fanny. "So it is, but this is a little labor of love and doesn't spoil the day at all. The child has talent, loves music, and needs help. I can't give her money, but I can teach her, so I do, and she is the most promising pupil I have. Help one another is part of the religion of our sisterhood, Fan." "I must put you in a story, Polly. I want a heroine, and you will do," said Kate. "Me? Why, there never was such a humdrum, unromantic thing as I am," cried Polly, amazed. "I've booked you, nevertheless, so in you go, but you may add as much romance as you like. It's time you did." "I'm ready for it when it comes, but it can't be forced, you know," and Polly blushed and smiled, as if some little spice of that delightful thing had stolen into her life, for all its prosaic seeming. Fanny was amused to see that the girls did not kiss at parting, but shook hands in a quiet, friendly fashion, looking at one another with eyes that said more than most gushing words. "I like your friends very much, Polly. I was afraid I should find them mannish and rough, or sentimental and conceited, but they are simple, sensible creatures, full of talent, and all sorts of fine things. I admire and respect them, and want to go again if I may." "Oh, Fan, I'm so glad. I hoped you'd like them. I knew they'd do you good, and I'll take you any time, for you stood the test better than I expected. Becky asked me to bring you again, and she seldom does that for fashionable young ladies, let me tell you." "I want to be ever so much better, and I think you and they might show me how," said Fanny, with a traitorous tremble in her voice. "We'll show you the sunny side of poverty and work, and that is a useful lesson for anyone, Miss Mills says," answered Polly, hoping that Fan would learn how much the poor can teach the rich, and what helpful friends girls may be to one another. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14. Nipped in the Bud. On the evening of Fan's visit, Polly sat down before her fire with a resolute and thoughtful aspect. She pulled her hair down, turned her skirt back, put her feet on the fender, and took Puddle into her lap, all of which arrangements signified that something very important had got to be thought over and settled. Polly did not soliloquize aloud, as heroines on the stage and in books have a way of doing, but the conversation she held with herself was very much like this. "I'm afraid there is something in it. I've tried to think it's nothing but vanity or imagination, yet I can't help seeing a difference and feeling as if I ought not to pretend that I don't. I know it's considered proper for girls to shut their eyes and let things come to a crisis, no matter how much mischief is done, but I don't think it's doing as we'd be done by, and it seems a great deal more honest to show a man that you don't love him before he has entirely lost his heart. The girls laughed at me when I said so, and they declared it would be a very improper thing to do, but I've observed that they don't hesitate to snub ineligible parties, as they call poor, very young or unpopular men. It's all right then, but when a nice person comes, it's part of the fun to let him go on to the very end, whether the girls care for him or not. The more proposals, the more credit. Fan says Trix always asks when she comes home after the summer excursions, "How many birds have you bagged?" As if men were partridges. What wicked creatures we are, some of us at least. I wonder why such a love of conquest was put into us. Mother says a great deal of it is owing to bad education nowadays, but some girls seem born for the express purpose of making trouble, and would manage to do it if they lived in a howling wilderness. I'm afraid I've got a spice of it, and if I had the chance should be as bad as any of them. I've tried it and liked it, and maybe this is the consequence of that night's fun. Here Polly leaned back and looked up at the little mirror over the chimney-piece, which was hung so that it reflected the faces of those about the fire. In it Polly saw a pair of telltale eyes looking out from a tangle of bright brown hair, cheeks that flushed and dimpled suddenly as the fresh mouth smiled with an expression of conscious power, half proud, half ashamed, and as pretty to see as the coquettish gesture with which she smoothed back her curls and flourished a white hand. For a minute she regarded the pleasant picture, while visions of girlish romances and triumphs danced through her head. Then she shook her hair all over her face and pushed her chair out of range of the mirror, saying with a droll mixture of self-reproach and self-approval in her tone, "Oh, Puddle, Puddle, what a fool I am!" Puss appeared to endorse the sentiment by a loud purr and a graceful wave of her tail, and Polly returned to the subject from which these little vanities had beguiled her. "Just suppose it is true, that he does ask me, and I say yes. What a stir it would make, and what fun it would be to see the faces of the girls when it came out. They all think a great deal of him because he's so hard to please, and almost any of them would feel immensely flattered if he liked them, whether they chose to marry him or not. Trix has tried for years to fascinate him, and he can't bear her, and I'm so glad. What a spiteful thing I am. Well, I can't help it. She does aggravate me so." And Polly gave the cat such a tweak of the ear that Puddle bounced out of her lap in high dudgeon. "It don't do to think of her, and I won't," said Polly to herself, setting her lips with a grim look that was not at all becoming. "What an easy life I should have, plenty of money, quantities of friends, all sorts of pleasures, and no work, no poverty, no cold shoulders or patched boots. I could do so much for all at home. How I should enjoy that!" And Polly let her thoughts revel in the luxurious future her fancy painted. It was a very bright picture, but something seemed amiss with it, for presently she sighed and shook her head, thinking sorrowfully, "Ah, but I don't love him, and I'm afraid I never can as I ought. He's very good and generous and wise and would be kind, I know, but somehow I can't imagine spending my life with him. I'm so afraid I should get tired of him, and then what should I do? Polly Sidney don't sound well, and Mrs. Arthur Sidney don't seem to fit me a bit. Wonder how it would seem to call him Arthur." And Polly said it under her breath with a look over her shoulder to be sure no one heard it. "It's a pretty name, but rather too fine, and I shouldn't dare to say Sid as his sister does. I like short, plain, homelike names, such as Will, Ned, or Tom. No, I can never care for him, and it's no use to try." The exclamation broke from Polly as if a sudden trouble had seized her, and laying her head down on her knees, she sat motionless for many minutes. When she looked up, her face wore an expression which no one had ever seen on it before, a look of mingled pain and patience, as if some loss had come to her, and left the bitterness of regret behind. "I won't think of myself, or try to mend one mistake by making another," she said with a heavy sigh. "I'll do what I can for Fan, and not stand between her and a chance of happiness. Let me see. How can I begin? I won't walk with him any more. I'll dodge and go roundabout ways so that we can't meet. I never had much faith in the remarkable coincidence of his always happening home to dinner just as I go to give the Roths their lesson. The fact is, I like to meet him. I am glad to be seen with him, and put on airs, I dare say, like a vain goose as I am. Well, I won't do it any more, and that will spare Fan one affliction. Poor dear, how I must have worried her all this time and never guessed it. She hasn't been quite as kind as ever, but when she got sharp I fancied it was dyspepsia. Oh, me, I wish the other trouble could be cured as easily as this." Here Puss showed an amiable desire to forgive and forget, and Polly took her up, saying aloud, "Puddle, when Missus abuses you, play it's dyspepsia, and don't bear malice, because it's a very trying disease, my dear." Then, going back to her thoughts, she rambled on again. "If he doesn't take that hint, I will give him a stronger one, for I will not have matters come to a crisis, though I can't deny that my wicked vanity strongly tempts me to try and bag a bird just for the excitement and credit of the thing. Polly, I'm ashamed of you. What would your blessed mother say to hear such expressions from you?" "I'd write and tell her all the worry, only it wouldn't do any good and would only trouble her. I've no right to tell Fan's secrets, and I'm ashamed to tell mine. No, I'll leave Mother in peace and fight it out alone. I do think Fan would suit him excellently by and by. He has known her all her life and has a good influence over her. Love would do so much toward making her what she might be. It's a shame to have the chance lost just because he happens to see me. I should think she'd hate me, but I'll show her that she needn't, and do all I can to help her, for she has been so good to me nothing shall ever make me forget that. It is a delicate and dangerous task, but I guess I can manage it. At any rate I'll try, and have nothing to reproach myself with if things do go contrary." What Polly thought of as she lay back in her chair with her eyes shut and a hopeless look on her face is none of our business, though we might feel a wish to know what caused a tear to gather slowly from time to time under her lashes and roll down on Puddle's Quaker-colored coat. Was it regret for the conquest she relinquished? Was it sympathy for her friend? Or was it an uncontrollable overflow of feeling as she read some sad or tender passage of the little romance which she kept hidden away in her own heart? On Monday Polly began the delicate and dangerous task. Instead of going to her pupils by way of the park and the pleasant streets adjoining, she took a roundabout route through back streets, and thus escaped Mr. Sidney, who, as usual, came home to dinner very early that day, and looked disappointed because he nowhere saw the bright face in the modest bonnet. Polly kept this up for a week, and by carefully avoiding the Shaws' house during calling hours, she saw nothing of Mr. Sidney, who, of course, didn't visit her at Miss Mill's. Minnie happened to be poorly that week and took no lesson, so Uncle Sid was deprived of his last hope, and looked as if his allowance of sunshine had been suddenly cut off. Now, as Polly was by no means a perfect creature, I am free to confess that the old temptation assailed her more than once that week, for when the first excitement of the dodging reform had subsided, she missed the pleasant little interviews that used to put a certain flavor of romance into her dull, hard-working days. She liked Mr. Sidney very much, for he had always been kind and friendly since the early times when he had treated the little girl with a courtesy which the young woman gratefully remembered. I don't think it was his wealth, accomplishments, or position that most attracted Polly, though these doubtless possessed a greater influence than she suspected. It was that indescribable something which women are quick to see and feel in men who have been blessed with wise and good mothers. This had an especial charm to Polly, for she soon found that this side of his character was not shown to everyone. With most girls he was very like the other young men of his set, except perhaps in a certain grace of manner, which was as natural to him as his respect for all womankind. But with Fanny and Polly he showed the domestic traits and virtues which are more engaging to womanly women than any amount of cool intellect or worldly wisdom. Polly had seen a good deal of him during her visits at the Shaws, where he was intimate owing to the friendship between Madam and his mother, but she had never thought of him as a possible lover for either Fanny or herself, because he was 6 or 8 years older than they, and still sometimes assumed the part of a venerable mentor, as in the early days. Lately this had changed, especially towards Polly, and it flattered her more than she would confess even to herself. She knew he admired her one talent, respected her independence, and enjoyed her society, but when something warmer and more flattering than admiration, respect, or pleasure crept into his manner, She could not help seeing that one of the good gifts of this life was daily coming more and more within her reach, and began to ask herself if she could honestly receive the gift and reward the giver. At first she tried to think she could, but unfortunately hearts are so contrary that they won't be obedient to reason, will, or even gratitude. Polly felt a very cordial friendship for Mr. Sidney, but not one particle of the love which is the only coin in which love can be truly paid. Then she took a fancy into her head that she ought to accept this piece of good fortune for the sake of the family and forget herself. But this false idea of self-sacrifice did not satisfy, for she was not a fashionable girl trained to believe that her first duty was to make a good match and never mind the consequences, though they rendered her miserable for life. Polly's creed was very simple. If I don't love him, I ought not to marry him, especially when I do love somebody else, though everything is against me. If she had read as many French novels as some young ladies, she might have considered it interesting to marry under the circumstances, and suffer a secret anguish to make her a romantic victim. But Polly's education had been neglected, and after a good deal of natural indecision, she did what most women do in such cases, thought she would wait and see. The discovery of Fanny's secret seemed to show her something to do, for if the wait-and-see decision was making her friend unhappy, it must be changed as soon as possible. This finished Polly's indecision, and after that night she never allowed herself to dwell on the pleasant temptation which came in a guise particularly attractive to a young girl with a spice of the old Eve in her composition. So day after day she trudged through the dull back streets, longing for the sunny park, the face that always brightened when it saw her coming, and most of all the chance of meeting, well, it wasn't Trix. When Saturday came, Polly started as usual for a visit to Becky and Bess, but couldn't resist stopping at the Shaws to leave a little parcel for Fan, though it wasn't calling time. As she stepped in, meaning to run up for a word if Fanny should chance to be alone, 2 hats on the hall table arrested her. "Who is here, Katy?" "Only Mr. Sidney and Master Tom. Won't you stop a bit, Miss Polly?" "Not this morning. I'm rather in a hurry." And away went Polly, as if a dozen eager pupils were clamoring for her presence. But as the door shut behind her, she felt so left out in the cold that her eyes filled, and when Nep, Tom's great Newfoundland, came blundering after her, she stopped and hugged his shaggy head, saying softly, as she looked into the brown benevolent eyes, full of almost human sympathy, "Now go back, old dear, you mustn't follow me." "Oh, Nep, it's so hard to put love away when you want it very much and it isn't right to take it." A foolish little speech to make to a dog, but, you see, Polly was only a tender-hearted girl trying to do her duty. "Since he is safe with Fanny, I may venture to walk where I like. It's such a lovely day, all the babies will be out, and it always does me good to see them," thought Polly, turning into the wide, sunny street, where West Enddom promenaded at that hour. The babies were out in full force, looking as gay and delicate and sweet as the snowdrops, hyacinths, and daffodils on the banks whence the snow had melted. But somehow the babies didn't do Polly the good she expected, though they smiled at her from their carriages and kissed their chubby hands as she passed them, for Polly had the sort of face that babies love. One tiny creature in blue plush was casting despairing glances after a very small lord of creation who was walking away with a toddling belle in white, while a second young gentleman in gorgeous purple gaiters was endeavoring to console the deserted damsel. "Take hold of Master Charlie's hand, Miss Mamie, and walk pretty like Willie and Flossie," said the maid. "No, no, I want to do with Willie, and he won't let me. Go away, Tarlie, I don't like you," cried little Bluebonnet, casting down her ermine muff and sobbing in a microscopic handkerchief, the thread-lace edging on which couldn't mitigate her woe, as it might have done that of an older sufferer. "Willie likes Flossie best, so stop crying and come right along, you naughty child." As poor little Dido was jerked away by the unsympathetic maid and Purple Gaiters essayed in vain to plead his cause, Polly said to herself, with a smile and a sigh, "How early the old story begins."
It seemed as if the spring weather had brought out all manner of tender things beside fresh grass and the first dandelions, for as she went down the street Polly kept seeing different phases of the sweet old story which she was trying to forget. At a street corner a black-eyed schoolboy was parting from a rosy-faced schoolgirl whose music roll he was reluctantly surrendering. "Don't you forget now," said the boy, looking bashfully into the bright eyes that danced with pleasure, as the girl blushed and smiled and answered reproachfully, "Why, of course I shan't." "That little romance runs smoothly so far. I hope it may to the end," said Polly heartily as she watched the lad tramp away, whistling as blithely as if his pleasurable emotions must find a vent or endanger the buttons on the round jacket, while the girl pranced on her own doorstep as if practicing for the joyful dance which she had promised not to forget. A little farther on Polly passed a newly engaged couple whom she knew, walking arm in arm for the first time, both wearing that proud yet conscious look which is so delightful to behold upon the countenances of those temporarily glorified beings. "How happy they seem! Oh, dear!" said Polly, and trudged on, wondering if her turn would ever come, and fearing that it was impossible. A glimpse of a motherly-looking lady entering a door, received by a flock of pretty children who cast themselves upon mamma and her parcels with cries of rapture, did Polly good, and when, a minute after, she passed a gray old couple walking placidly together in the sunshine, she felt better still, and was glad to see such a happy ending to the romance she had read all down the street. As if the mischievous little god wished to take Polly at a disadvantage, or perhaps to give her another chance, just at that instant Mr. Sidney appeared at her side. How he got there was never very clear to Polly, but there he was, flushed and a little out of breath, but looking so glad to see her that she hadn't the heart to be stiff and cool, as she had fully intended to be when they met. "Very warm, isn't it?" he said, when he had shaken hands and fallen into step just in the old way. "You seem to find it so?" And Polly laughed with a sudden sparkle in her eyes. She really couldn't help it, it was so pleasant to see him again, just when she was feeling so lonely. "Have you given up teaching the Roths?" asked Sidney, changing the subject. "No." "Do you go as usual?" "Yes." "Well, it's a mystery to me how you get there." "As much as it is to me how you got here so suddenly." "I saw you from the Shaws' window and took the liberty of running after you by the back street," he said, laughing. "That is the way I get to the Roths," answered Polly. She did not mean to tell, but his frankness was so agreeable she forgot herself. "It's not nearly so pleasant or so short for you as the park." "I know it, but people sometimes get tired of old ways and like to try new ones." Polly didn't say that quite naturally, and Sidney gave her a quick look as he asked, "Do you get tired of old friends, too, Miss Polly?" "Not often, but—" And there she stuck, for the fear of being ungrateful or unkind made her almost hope that he wouldn't take the hint which she had been carefully preparing for him. There was a dreadful little pause, which Polly broke by saying abruptly, "How is Fan?" "Dashing as ever." "Do you know, I'm rather disappointed in Fanny, for she don't seem to improve with her years," said Sidney, as if he accepted the diversion and was glad of it. "Ah, you never see her at her best. She puts on that dashing air before people to hide her real self. But I know her better, and I assure you that she does improve. She tries to mend her faults, though she won't own it, and will surprise you some day by the amount of heart and sense and goodness she has got." Polly spoke heartily now, and Sidney looked at her as if Fanny's defender pleased him more than Fanny's defense. "I'm very glad to hear it, and willingly take your word for it. Everybody shows you their good side, I think, and that is why you find the world such a pleasant place." "Oh, but I don't. It often seems like a very hard and dismal place, and I croak over my trials like an ungrateful raven." "Can't we make the trials lighter for you?" The voice that put the question was so very kind that Polly dared not look up, because she knew what the eyes were silently saying. "Thank you. No,
I don't get more tribulation than is good for me, I fancy, and we are apt to make mistakes when we try to dodge troubles." "Or people," added Sidney, in a tone that made Polly color up to her forehead. "How lovely the park looks," she said in great confusion. "Yes, it's the pleasantest walk we have, don't you think so?" asked the artful young man, laying a trap into which Polly immediately fell. "Yes, indeed, it's always so refreshing to me to see a little bit of the country, as it were, especially at this season." "Oh, Polly, Polly, what a stupid speech to make when you had just given him to understand that you were tired of the park!" Not being a fool or a coxcomb, Sidney put this and that together, and taking various trifles into the account, he had by this time come to the conclusion that Polly had heard the same bits of gossip that he had, which linked their names together, that she didn't like it, and tried to show she didn't in this way. He was quicker to take a hint than she had expected, and being both proud and generous, resolved to settle the matter at once for Polly's sake as well as his own. So when she made her last brilliant remark, he said quietly, watching her face keenly all the while, "I thought so. Well, I'm going out of town on business for several weeks, so you can enjoy your little bit of country without being annoyed by me." "Annoyed? Oh, no!" cried Polly earnestly, then stopped short, not knowing what to say for herself. She thought she had a good deal of the coquette in her, and I've no doubt that with time and training she would have become a very dangerous little person, but now she was far too transparent and straightforward by nature even to tell a white lie cleverly. Sidney knew this and liked her for it, but he took advantage of it nevertheless by asking suddenly, "Honestly now, wouldn't you go the old way and enjoy it as much as ever if I wasn't anywhere about to set the busybodies gossiping?" "Yes," said Polly before she could stop herself, and then could have bitten her tongue out for being so rude. Another awful pause seemed impending, but just at that moment a horseman clattered by with a smile and a salute, which caused Polly to exclaim, "Oh, there's Tom!" with a tone and a look that silenced the words hovering on Sidney's lips, and caused him to hold out his hand with a look which made Polly's heart flutter then and ache with pity for a good while afterward, though he only said, "Good-bye, Polly." He was gone before she could do anything but look up at him with a remorseful face, and she walked on, feeling that the first and perhaps the only lover she would ever have had read his answer and accepted it in silence. She did not know what else he had read, and comforted herself with the thought that he did not care for her very much, since he took the first rebuff so quickly. Polly did not return to her favorite walk till she learned from Minnie that Uncle had really left town, and then she found that his friendly company and conversation was what had made the way so pleasant after all. She sighed over the perversity of things in general, and croaked a little over her trials in particular, but on the whole got over her loss better than she expected, for soon she had other sorrows beside her own to comfort, and such work does a body more good than floods of regretful tears, or hours of sentimental lamentation. She shunned Fanny for a day or two, but gained nothing by it, for that young lady, hearing of Sidney's sudden departure, could not rest till she discovered the cause of it, and walked in upon Polly one afternoon, just when the dusk made it a propitious hour for tender confidences. "What have you been doing with yourself lately?" asked Fanny, composing herself with her back toward the rapidly waning light. "Wagging to and fro as usual. What's the news with you?" answered Polly, feeling that something was coming, and rather glad to have it over and done with. "Nothing particular. Trix treats Tom shamefully, and he bears it like a lamb. I tell him to break his engagement and not be worried so, but he won't, because she has been jilted once, and he thinks it such a mean thing to do." "Perhaps she'll jilt him." "I've no doubt she will, if anything better comes along. But Trix is getting passé, and I shouldn't wonder if she kept him to his word just out of perversity, if nothing else." "Poor Tom, what a fate!" said Polly, with what was meant to be a comical groan, but it sounded so tragical that she saw it wouldn't pass, and hastened to hide the failure by saying with a laugh,
If you call tricks passé at 23, what shall we all be at 25? Utterly done with and laid upon the shelf. I feel so already, for I don't get half the attention I used to have. And the other night I heard Maud and Grace wondering why these old girls didn't stay at home and give them a chance. How is Maudie? Pretty well, but she worries me by her queer tastes and notions. She loves to go into the kitchen and mess. She hates to study, and said right before the Vincents that she should think it would be great fun to be a beggar girl, to go around with a basket. It must be so interesting to see what you'd get. Minnie said the other day she wished she was a pigeon, so she could paddle in the puddles and not fuss about rubbers. By the way, when is her uncle coming back? Asked Fanny, who couldn't wait any longer, and joyfully seized the opening Polly made for her. I'm sure I don't know. Nor care, I suppose, you hard-hearted thing. Why, Fan, what do you mean? I'm not blind, my dear. Neither is Tom, and when a young gentleman cuts a call abruptly short and races after a young lady and is seen holding her hand at the quietest corner of the park, and then goes traveling all of a sudden, we know what it means, if you don't. Who got up that nice idea, I should like to know? Demanded Polly as Fanny stopped for breath. Now don't be affected, Polly, but just tell me like a dear, hasn't he proposed? No, he hasn't. Don't you think he means to? I don't think he'll ever say a word to me. Well, I am surprised. And Fanny drew a long breath, as if a load was off her mind. Then she added in a changed tone, But don't you love him, Polly? No. Truly? Truly, Fan. Neither spoke for a minute, but the heart of one of them beat joyfully, and the dusk hid a very happy face. Don't you think he cared for you, dear? Asked Fanny presently. I don't mean to be prying, but I really thought he did. That's not for me to say, but if it is so, it's only a passing fancy, and he'll soon get over it. Do tell me all about it. I'm so interested, and I know something has happened. I hear it in your voice, for I can't see your face. Do you remember the talk we had once after reading one of Miss Edgeworth's stories about not letting one's lovers come to a declaration if one didn't love them? Yes. And you girls said it wasn't proper, and I said it was honest anyway. Well, I always meant to try it if I got a chance, and I have. Mind you, I don't say Mr. Sidney loved me, for he never said so, and never will now. But I did fancy he rather liked me, and might do more if I didn't show him that it was of no use. And you did? Cried Fanny, much excited. I just gave him a hint, and he took it. He meant to go away before that, so I don't think his heart is broken, or mind what silly tattlers say. I didn't like his meeting me so much, and told him so by going another way. He understood, and, being a gentleman, made no fuss. I dare say he thought I was a vain goose, and laughed at me for my pains, like Churchill and Helen. No, he wouldn't. He'd like it and respect you for doing it. But, Polly, it would have been a grand thing for you. I can't sell myself for an establishment. Mercy, what an idea! Well, that's the plain English of half your fashionable matches. I'm odd, as you know, and prefer to be an independent spinster and teach music all my days. Ah, but you won't. You were made for a nice, happy home of your own, and I hope you'll get it, Polly dear, said Fanny warmly, feeling so grateful to Polly that she found it hard not to pour out all her secret at once. I hope I may, but I doubt it, answered Polly, in a tone that made Fanny wonder if she, too, knew what heartache meant. Something troubles you, Polly? What is it? Confide in me as I do in you, said Fanny tenderly, for all the coldness she had tried to hide from Polly had melted in the sudden sunshine that had come to her. Do you always? Asked her friend, leaning forward with an irresistible desire to win back the old-time love and confidence too precious to be exchanged for a little brief excitement, or the barren honor of bagging a bird, to use Trix's elegant expression. Fanny understood it then, and threw herself into Polly's arms, crying with a shower of grateful tears, "Oh, my dear, my dear! Did you do it for my sake?" And Polly held her close, saying in that tender voice of hers, "I didn't mean to let a lover part this pair of friends, if I could help it." End of chapter 14. Chapter 15. Breakers Ahead. Going into the Shaws one evening, Polly found Maud sitting on the stairs with a troubled face. "Oh, Polly, I'm so glad you've come," cried the little girl, running to hug her. "What's the matter, dearie?" "I don't know. Something dreadful must have happened, for Mamma and Fan are crying together upstairs. Papa is shut up in the library, and Tom is raging round like a bear in the dining room." "I guess it isn't anything very bad. Perhaps Mamma is sicker than usual, or Papa worried about business, or Tom in some new scrape. Don't look so frightened, Maudie, but come into the parlor and see what I've got for you," said Polly, feeling that there was trouble of some sort in the air, but trying to cheer the child, for her little face was full of a sorrowful anxiety that went to Polly's heart. "I don't think I can like anything till I know what the matter is," answered Maud. "It's something horrid, I'm sure. For when Papa came home he went up to Mamma's room and talked ever so long, and Mamma cried very loud, and when I tried to go in, Fan wouldn't let me, and she looked scared and strange. I wanted to go to Papa when he came down, but the door was locked, and he said, 'Not now, my little girl,' and then I sat here waiting to see what would happen, and Tom came home, but when I ran to tell him, he said, 'Go away and don't bother me,' and just took me by the shoulders and put me out. Oh, dear, everything is so queer and horrid, I don't know what to do." Maud began to cry, and Polly sat down on the stairs beside her, trying to comfort her, while her own thoughts were full of a vague fear. All at once the dining-room door opened, and Tom's head appeared. A single glance showed Polly that something was the matter, for the care and elegance which usually marked his appearance were entirely wanting. His tie was under one ear, his hair in a toss, the cherished mustache had a neglected air, and his face an expression both excited, ashamed, and distressed. Even his voice betrayed disturbance, for instead of the affable greeting he usually bestowed on the young lady, he seemed to have fallen back into the bluff tone of his boyish days, and all he said was, "Hello, Polly." "How do you do?" answered Polly. "I'm in a devil of a mess, thank you. Send that chicken upstairs and come in and hear about it," he said, as if he had been longing to tell someone, and welcomed prudent Polly as a special providence. "Go up, dearie, and amuse yourself with this book and these ginger snaps that I made for you. There's a good child," whispered Polly, as Maud rubbed away her tears and stared at Tom with round, inquisitive eyes. "You'll tell me all about it by and by, won't you?" she whispered, preparing to obey. "If I may," answered Polly. Maud departed with unexpected docility, and Polly went into the dining-room, where Tom was wandering about in a restless way. If he had been raging like a bear, Polly wouldn't have cared. She was so pleased that he wanted her, and so glad to be a confidant, as she used to be in the happy old days, that she would joyfully have faced a much more formidable person than reckless Tom. "Now then, what is it?" she said, coming straight to the point. "Guess." "You've killed your horse racing." "Worse than that." "You're suspended again." "Worse than that." "Trix has run away with somebody," cried Polly with a gasp. "Worse still." "Oh, Tom, you haven't horsewhipped or shot anyone." "Came pretty near blowing my own brains out, but you see I didn't." "I can't guess. Tell me, quick." "Well, I'm expelled." Tom paused on the rug as he gave the answer, and looked at Polly to see how she took it. To his surprise, she seemed almost relieved, and after a minute's silence said soberly, "That's bad, very bad, but it might have been worse."
It is worse." And Tom walked away again with a despairing sort of groan. "Don't knock the chairs about, but come and sit down, and tell me quietly." "Can't do it." "Well, go on then. Are you truly expelled? Can't it be made up? What did you do?" "It's a true bill this time. I just had a row with the chapel watchman and knocked him down. If it was a first offense, I might have got off, but you see I've had no end of narrow escapes, and this was my last chance. I've lost it, and now there'll be the dickens to pay. I knew it was all up with me, so I didn't wait to be turned out, but just took myself off." "What will your father say?" "It will come down hard on the governor, but the worst of it is—" There Tom stopped, and stood a minute in the middle of the room with his head down, as if he didn't find it easy to tell even kind little Polly. Then out came the truth, all in a breath, just as he used to bolt out his boyish misdemeanors, and then back up against the wall, ready to take the consequences. "I owe an awful lot of money that the governor doesn't know about." "Oh, Tom, how could you?" "I've been an extravagant rascal, I know it, and I'm thundering sorry, but that don't help a fellow. I've got to tell the dear old buffer, and that's where it cuts." At another time Polly would have laughed at the contrast between Tom's face and his language, but there was a sincere remorse which made even the dreadful word buffer rather touching than otherwise. "He will be very angry, I dare say, but he'll help you, won't he? He always does, Fan says." "That's the worst of it, you see. He's paid up so often that the last time he said his patience couldn't stand it, nor his pocket either, and if I got into any more scrapes of that sort I must get out as I could. I meant to be as steady as Bunker Hill Monument, but here I am again, worse than ever. For last quarter I didn't say anything to Father, he was so bothered by the loss of those ships just then. So things have mounted up confoundedly." "What have you done with all your money?" "Hanged if I know." "Can't you pay it anyway?" "Don't see how, as I haven't a cent of my own, and no way of getting it unless I try gambling." "Oh, mercy, no! Sell your horse!" cried Polly, after a minute of deep meditation. "I have, but he didn't bring half I gave for him. I lamed him last winter, and the beggar won't get over it." "And that didn't pay up the debts?" "Only about half of 'em." "Why, Tom, how much do you owe?" "I've dodged figuring it up till yesterday. Then things were so desperate I thought I might as well face the truth, so I overhauled my accounts, and there's the result." Tom threw a blotted, crumpled paper into Polly's lap and tramped up and down again faster than ever. Polly took one look at the total and clasped her hands, for to her inexperienced eyes it looked appalling. "Tidy little sum, isn't it?" asked Tom, who couldn't bear the silence or the startled, grieved look in Polly's eyes. "It's awful. I don't wonder you dread telling your father." "I'd rather be shot. I say, Polly, suppose we break it to 'em easy," added Tom, after another turn. "How do you mean?" "Why, suppose Fan, or better still you, go and sort of pave the way. I can't bear to come down on him with the whole truth at once." "So you'd like to have me go and tell him for you?" Polly's lip curled a little as she said that, and she gave Tom a look that would have shown him how blue eyes can flash, if he had seen it. But he was at the window and didn't turn, as he said slowly, "Well, you see, he's so fond of you, we all confide in you, and you're so like one of the family that it seems quite natural. Just tell him I'm expelled, you know, and as much more as you like, then I'll come in, and we'll have it out." Polly rose and went to the door without a word. In doing so, Tom caught a glimpse of her face, and said hastily, "Don't you think it would be a good plan?" "No, I don't." "Why not? Don't you think he'd rather have it told him nicely by you than blurted out as I always do blurt things?" "I know he'd rather have his son go to him and tell the truth, like a man, instead of sending a girl to do what he is afraid to do himself." If Polly had suddenly boxed his ears, Tom couldn't have looked more taken aback than by that burst. He looked at her excited face, seemed to understand the meaning of it, and remembered all at once that he was trying to hide behind a girl. He turned scarlet, said shortly, "Come back, Polly," and walked straight out of the room,
looking as if going to instant execution, for poor Tom had been taught to fear his father, and had not entirely outgrown the dread. Polly sat down, looking both satisfied and troubled. "I hope I did right," she said to herself. "I couldn't bear to have him shirk and seem cowardly. He isn't, only he didn't think how it seemed to me, and I don't wonder he was a little afraid Mr. Shaw is so severe with the poor fellow. Oh dear, what should we do if Will got into such scrapes? Thank goodness he's poor and can't. I'm so glad of that." Then she sat silent beside the half-open door, hearing the murmur of Tom's voice across the hall, and hoping with all her heart that he wouldn't have a very hard time. He seemed to tell his story rapidly and steadily, without interruption, to the end. Then Polly heard Mr. Shaw's deeper voice say a few words, at which Tom uttered a loud exclamation as if taken by surprise. Polly couldn't distinguish a word, so she kept her seat, wondering anxiously what was going on between the two men. A sudden pause seemed to follow Tom's ejaculation. Then Mr. Shaw talked for a long time in a low, earnest tone, so different from the angry one Polly had expected to hear that it made her nervous, for Mr. Shaw usually blew Tom up first and forgave him afterward, as Maud said. Presently Tom's voice was heard, apparently asking eager questions, to which brief replies were given. Then a dead silence fell upon the room, and nothing was heard but the spring rain softly falling out of doors. All of a sudden she heard a movement, and Tom's voice say audibly, "Let me bring Polly," and he appeared, looking so pale and miserable that Polly was frightened. "Go and say something to him. I can't. Poor old father. If I'd only known." And to Polly's utter dismay, Tom threw himself into a chair and laid his head down on the table, as if he had got a blow that was too much for him. "Oh, Tom, what is it?" cried Polly, hurrying to him, full of fear she dared not speak. Without looking up, Tom answered, in a smothered voice, "Failed. All gone to smash, and tomorrow everyone will know it." Polly held on to the back of Tom's chair for a minute, for the news took her breath away, and she felt as if the world was coming to an end. Failed was such a vaguely dreadful word to her. "Is it very bad?" she asked softly, feeling as if anything was better than to stand still and see Tom so wretched. "Yes. He means to give up everything. He's done his best, but it can't be staved off any longer, and it's all up with him." "Oh, I wish I had $1,000,000 to give him," cried Polly, clasping her hands with the tears running down her cheeks. "How does he bear it, Tom?" "Like a man, Polly, and I'm proud of him," said Tom, looking up all red and excited with the emotions he was trying to keep under. "Everything has been against him, and he has fought all alone to stand the pressure. But it's too much for him, and he's given in. It's an honorable failure, mind you, and no one can say a word against him. I'd like to see him try it." And Tom clenched his hands, as if it would be an immense relief to him to thrash 6 aspersers of his father's honest name. "Of course they can't. This is what poor Maud troubled about. He had told your mother and Fan before you came, and that is why they are so unhappy, I suppose. They are safe enough. Father hasn't touched Mother's money. He couldn't rob his girls, he said, and that's all safe for him. Isn't he a trump, Polly?" And Tom's face shone with pride, even while his lips would twitch with a tenderer feeling. "If I could only do anything to help," cried Polly, oppressed with her own powerlessness. "You can. Go and be good to him. You know how. He needs it enough all alone there. I can't do it, for I'm only a curse instead of a comfort to him." "How did he take your news?" asked Polly, who for a time had forgotten the lesser trouble in the greater. "Like a lamb. For when I'd done, he only said, 'My poor lad, we must bear with one another,' and then told his story." "I'm glad he was kind," began Polly in a soothing tone, but Tom cried out remorsefully, "That's what knocks me over. Just when I ought to be a pride and a prop to him, I bring him my debts and disgrace, and he never says a word of blame. It's no use, I can't stand it." And Tom's head went down again with something very like a sob that would come in spite of manful efforts to keep it back, for the poor fellow had the warmest heart that ever was, and all the fine waistcoats outside couldn't spoil it.
That sound gave Polly more pain than the news of a dozen failures and expulsions, and it was as impossible for her to resist putting her hand tenderly on the bent head, as it was for her to help noticing with pleasure how brown the little curls were growing, and how soft they were. In spite of her sorrow, she enjoyed that minute very much, for she was a born consoler, and, it is hardly necessary for me to add, loved this reprehensible Tom with all her heart. It was a very foolish thing for her to do, she quite agreed to that. She couldn't understand it, explain it, or help it. She only felt that she did care for him very much, in spite of his faults, his indifference, and his engagement. You see, she learned to love him one summer when he made them a visit. That was before Trix caught him, and when she heard that piece of news, Polly couldn't unlove him all at once, though she tried very hard, as was her duty. That engagement was such a farce that she never had much faith in it, so she put her love away in a corner of her heart, and tried to forget it, hoping it would either die or have a right to live. It didn't make her very miserable, because patience, work, and common sense lent her a hand, and hope would keep popping up its bright face from the bottom of her Pandora box of troubles. Now and then, when anyone said Trix wouldn't jilt Tom, or that Tom did care for Trix more than he should, Polly had a pang, and thought she couldn't possibly bear it. But she always found she could, and so came to the conclusion that it was a merciful provision of nature that girls' hearts could stand so much, and their appetites continue good, when unrequited love was starving. Now she could not help yearning over this faulty, well-beloved scapegrace Tom, or help thinking, with a little thrill of hope, if Trix only cared for his money, she may cast him off now he's lost it, but I'll love him all the better because he's poor. With this feeling warm at her heart, I don't wonder that Polly's hand had a soothing effect, and that after a heave or two Tom's shoulders were quiet, and certain smothered sniffs suggested that he would be all right again, if he could only wipe his eyes without anyone seeing him do it. Polly seemed to divine his wish, and tucking a little clean handkerchief into one of his half-open hands, she said, "I'm going to your father now." And with a farewell smooth, so comforting that Tom wished she'd do it again, she went away. As she paused a minute in the hall to steady herself, Maud called her from above, and thinking that the women might need her more than the men, she ran up to find Fanny waiting for her in her own room. "Mamma's asleep, quite worn out, poor dear, so we can talk in here without troubling her," said Fanny, receiving her friend so quietly that Polly was amazed. "Let me come too. I won't make any fuss. It's so dreadful to be shut out everywhere and have people crying and talking and locked up and not know what it means," said Maud beseechingly. "You do know now, I've told her, Polly," said Fan, as they sat down together, and Maud perched herself on the bed so that she might retire among the pillows if her feelings were too much for her. "I'm glad you take it so well, dear. I was afraid it might upset you," said Polly, seeing now that, in spite of her quiet manner, Fan's eyes had an excited look, and her cheeks a feverish color. "I shall groan and moan by and by, I dare say, but at first it sort of dazed me, and now it begins to excite me. I ought to be full of sorrow for poor Papa, and I am truly sorry, but wicked as it may seem, it's a fact, Polly, that I'm half glad it's happened, for it takes me out of myself and gives me something to do." Fanny's eyes fell and her color rose as she spoke, but Polly understood why she wanted to forget herself, and put her arm round her with a more tender sympathy than Fanny guessed. "Perhaps things are not as bad as they seem. I don't know much about such matters, but I've seen people who have failed, and they seem just as comfortable as before," said Polly. "It won't be so with us, for Papa means to give up everything, and not have a word said against him. Mamma's little property is settled upon her, and hasn't been risked. That touched her so much. She dreads poverty even more than I do, but she begged him to take it if it would help him. That pleased him, but he said nothing would induce him to do it, for it wouldn't help much, and was hardly enough to keep her comfortable." "Do you know what he means to do?" asked Polly anxiously. "He said that his plans were not made, but he meant to go into the little house that belonged to Grandma as soon as he could, for it wasn't honest for a bankrupt to keep up an establishment like this." "I shan't mind that at all. I like the little house 'cause it's got a garden, and there's a cunning room with a three-cornered closet in it that I always wanted.
"If that's all, I don't think bankrupting is so very bad," said Maud, taking a cheerful view of things. "Ah, just wait till the carriage goes, and the nice clothes and the servants, and we have to scratch along as we can. You'll change your mind then, poor child," said Fanny, whose ideas of failure were decidedly tragical. "Will they take all my things away?" cried Maud in dismay. "I dare say. I don't know what we are allowed to keep, but not much, I fancy." And Fan looked as if strung up to sacrifice everything she possessed. "They shan't have my new earrings, I'll hide 'em, and my best dress, and my gold smelling bottle. Oh, 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 I think it's mean to take a little girl's things away." And Maud dived among the pillows to smother a wail of anguish at the prospect of being bereft of her treasures. Polly soon lured her out again by assurances that she wouldn't be utterly despoiled, and promises to try and soften the hard hearts of her father's creditors if the earrings and the smelling bottle were attached. "I wonder if we shall be able to keep one servant just till we learn how to do the work," said Fanny, looking at her white hands with a sigh. But Maud clapped hers and gave a joyful bounce as she cried, "Now I can learn to cook. I so love to beat eggs. I'll have an apron with a bib to it like Polly's, and a feather duster, and sweep the stairs maybe with my head tied up like Katy. Oh, what fun!" "Don't laugh at her or discourage her. Let her find comfort in bibs and dustpans, if she can," whispered Polly to Fan, while Maud took a joyful header among the pillows and came up smiling and blousy, for she loved housework and often got lectured for stolen visits to the kitchen and surreptitious sweepings and dustings when the coast was clear. "Mamma is so feeble I shall have to keep house, I suppose, and you must show me how, Polly," said Fan. "Good practice, ma'am, as you'll find out some day," answered Polly, laughing significantly. Fanny smiled, then both grew grave and sad. "This changes everything. The old set will drop me as we did the Mertons when their father failed, and my prospects, as we say, are quite ruined." "I don't believe it. Your real friends won't drop you, and you'll find out which the true ones are now. I know one friend who will be kinder than ever." "Oh, Polly, do you think so?" And Fanny's eyes softened with sudden tears. "I know who she means," cried Maud, always eager to find out things. "It's herself. Polly won't mind if we are poor, 'cause she likes beggars." "Is that who you meant?" asked Fan wistfully. "No, it's a much better and dearer friend than I am," said Polly, pinching Fanny's cheek as it reddened prettily under her eyes. "You'll never guess, Maud, so I wouldn't try, but be planning what you will put in your cunning three-cornered closet when you get it." Having got rid of Miss Paulina Pry, as Tom called Maud, who was immediately absorbed by her cupboard, the older girls soberly discussed the sudden change which had come, and Polly was surprised to see what unexpected strength and sense Fanny showed. Polly was too unconscious of the change which love had made in herself to understand at first the cause of her friend's new patience and fortitude, but she rejoiced over it, and felt that her prophecy would yet be fulfilled. Presently Maud emerged from her new closet, bringing a somewhat startling idea with her. "Do bankrupting men," Maud liked that new word, "always have fits?" "Mercy, no! What put that into your head, child?" cried Polly. "Why, Mr. Merton did, and I was thinking Papa had got one down there, and it kind of frightened me." "Mr. Merton's was a bad, disgraceful failure, and I don't wonder he had a fit. Ours isn't, and Papa won't do anything of that sort, you may be sure," said Fanny, with as proud an air as if our failure was rather an honor than otherwise. "Don't you think you and Maud had better go down and see him?" asked Polly. "Perhaps he wouldn't like it, and I don't know what to say either," began Fan, but Polly said eagerly, "I know he would like it. Never mind what you say, just go, and show him that you don't doubt or blame him for this, but love him all the more, and are ready and glad to help him bear the trouble." "I'm going. I ain't afraid. I'll just hug him and say I'm ever so glad we are going to the little house," cried Maud, scrambling off the bed and running downstairs. "Come with me, Polly, and tell me what to do," said Fanny, drawing her friend after her. "You'll know what to do when you see him, better than I can tell you," answered Polly, readily yielding, for she knew they considered her quite one of the family, as Tom said. At the study door they found Maud, whose courage had given out, for Mr. Merton's fit rather haunted her. Polly opened the door, and the minute Fanny saw her father she did know what to do. The fire was low, the gas dim, and Mr. Shaw was sitting in his easy-chair, his gray head in both his hands, looking lonely, old, and bowed down with care. Fanny gave Polly one look, then went and took the gray head in both her arms, saying, with a tender quiver in her voice, "Father dear, we've come to help you bear it." Mr. Shaw looked up, and seeing in his daughter's face something that had never been there before, put his arm about her and leaned his tired head against hers, as if, when least expected, he had found the consolation he most needed. In that minute Fanny felt, with mingled joy and self-reproach, what a daughter might be to her father. And Polly, thinking of feeble, selfish Mrs. Shaw asleep upstairs, saw with sudden clearness what a wife should be to her husband, a helpmeet, not a burden. Touched by these unusual demonstrations, Maud crept quietly to her father's knee, and whispered, with a great tear shining on her little pug nose, "Papa, we don't mind it much, and I'm going to help Fan keep house for you. I'd like to do it, truly." Mr. Shaw's other arm went round the child, and for a minute no one said anything, for Polly had slipped behind his chair that nothing should disturb the three, who were learning from misfortune how much they loved one another. Presently Mr. Shaw steadied himself, and asked, "Where is my other daughter? Where's my Polly?" She was there at once, gave him one of the quiet kisses that had more than usual tenderness in it, for she loved to hear him say "my other daughter," and then she whispered, "Don't you want Tom too?" "Of course I do. Where is the poor fellow?" "I'll bring him," and Polly departed with most obliging alacrity. But in the hall she paused a minute to peep into the glass and see if she was all right, for somehow she was more anxious to look neat and pretty to Tom in his hour of trouble than she had ever been in his prosperous days. In lifting her arms to perk up the bow at her throat, she knocked a hat off the bracket. Now, a shiny black beaver is not an object exactly calculated to inspire tender or romantic sentiments, one would fancy, but that particular stovepipe seemed to touch Polly to the heart, for she caught it up, as if its fall suggested a greater one, smoothed out a slight dint, as if it was symbolical of the hard knocks its owner's head was now in danger of receiving, and stood looking at it with as much pity and respect as if it had been the crown of a disinherited prince. Girls will do such foolish little things, and though we laugh at them, I think we like them the better for it, after all. Richard was himself again when Polly entered, for the handkerchief had disappeared. His head was erect, his face was steady, and his whole air had a dogged composure which seemed to say to fate, "Hit away, I'm ready." He did not hear Polly come in, for he was looking fixedly at the fire, with eyes that evidently saw a very different future there from that which it used to show him. But when she said, "Tom, dear, your father wants you," he got up at once, held out his hand to her, saying, "Come too, we can't get on without you," and took her back into the study with him. Then they had a long talk, for the family troubles seemed to warm and strengthen the family affection and confidence, and as the young people listened while Mr. Shaw told them as much of his business perplexities as they could understand, every one of them blamed him or herself for going on so gaily and blindly while the storm was gathering, and the poor man was left to meet it all alone. Now, however, the thunderclap had come, and after the first alarm, finding they were not killed, they began to discover a certain half-anxious, half-pleasant excitement in talking it over, encouraging one another, and feeling unusually friendly, as people do when a sudden shower drives 2 or 3 to the shelter of one umbrella. It was a sober talk, but not all sad, for Mr. Shaw felt inexpressibly comforted by his children's unexpected sympathy, and they, trying to take the downfall cheerfully for his sake, found it easier to bear themselves,
They even laughed occasionally, for the girls in their ignorance asked queer questions, Tom made ludicrously unbusinesslike propositions, and Maud gave them one hearty peal that did a world of good by pensively remarking, when the plans for the future had been explained to her, "I'm so relieved, for when Papa said we must give up everything, and Mamma called us all beggars, I did think I'd got to go round asking for cold victuals with a big basket and an old shawl over my head. I said once I'd like that, but I'm afraid I shouldn't, for I can't bear Indian cake and cold potatoes. That's what the poor children always seem to get, and I should hate to have Grace and the rest see me scuffing round the back gates." "My little girl shall never come to that if I can help it," said Mr. Shaw, holding her close, with a look that made Maud add, as she laid her cheek against his own, "But I'd do it, father, if you asked me to, for I truly want to help." "So do I," cried Fanny, wondering at the same minute how it would seem to wear turned silks and clean her gloves. Tom said nothing, but drew toward him a paper of figures which his father had drawn up, and speedily reduced himself to the verge of distraction by trying to understand them, in his ardent desire to prove his willingness to put his shoulder to the wheel. "We shall pull through, children, so don't borrow trouble. Only be ready for discomforts and annoyances. Put your pride in your pockets, and remember, poverty isn't disgraceful, but dishonesty is." Polly had always loved kind Mr. Shaw, but now she respected him heartily, and felt that she had not done him justice when she sometimes thought that he only cared for making money. "I shouldn't wonder if this was a good thing for the whole family, though it don't look so. Mrs. Shaw will take it the hardest, but it may stir her up so she will forget her nerves and be as busy and happy as Mother is," said Polly to herself, in a hopeful mood, for poverty was an old friend, and she had learned long ago not to fear it, but to take its bitter and its sweet, and make the best of both. When they parted for the night, Polly slipped away first, to leave them free, yet couldn't help lingering outside to see how tenderly the girls parted from their father. Tom hadn't a word to say for himself, for men don't kiss, caress, or cry when they feel most, and all he could do to express his sympathy and penitence was to wring his father's hand with a face full of respect, regret, and affection, and then bolt upstairs as if the Furies were after him, as they were, in a mild and modern form. End of chapter 15.
Chapter 16. A Dress Parade. The weeks that followed taught the Shaws, as many other families have been taught, how rapidly riches take to themselves wings and fly away, when they once begin to go. Mr. Shaw carried out his plans with an energy and patience that worked wonders, and touched the hearts of his hardest creditors. The big house was given up as soon as possible, and the little house taken, being made comfortable with the furniture Madam left there when she went to live with her son. The old-fashioned things that had been let with the house, and now seemed almost like a gift from Grandma, doubly precious in these troublous times. At the auction, several persons tried to show the family that, though they had lost their fortune, friends still remained, for one bid in Fanny's piano, and sent it to her. Another secured certain luxurious articles for Mrs. Shaw's comfort, and a third saved such of Mr. Shaw's books as he valued most, for he had kept his word and given up everything with the most punctilious integrity. So the little house was not bare, but made pleasant to their eyes by these waifs from the wreck, brought them by the tide of sympathy and goodwill which soon set in. Everybody who knew them hastened to call, many from a real regard, but more from a mere curiosity to see how they took it. This was one of the hardest things they had to bear, and Tom used strong language more than once, when some fine lady came to condole and went away to gossip. Polly's hopes of Mrs. Shaw were disappointed, for misfortune did not have a bracing effect. She took to her bed at once, received her friends in tears and a point-lace cap, and cheered her family by plaintively inquiring when she was to be taken to the almshouse. This was hard for Fanny, but after an interval of despair she came to the conclusion that, under the circumstances, it was the best thing her mother could have done, and with something of her father's energy, Fanny shouldered the new burden, feeling that at last necessity had given her what she had long needed, something to do. The poor girl knew as much of household affairs as Snip, but pride and the resolution to stand by father kept up her courage, and she worked away with feverish activity at whatever task came first, till, just as strength and heart were about to fail, order began to emerge from chaos, and the vision of a home made happy and comfortable by her skill and care came to repay and sustain her. Maud, being relieved from the fear of backdoor beggary, soon became reconciled to bankruptcy, thought it rather a good joke on the whole, for children like novelty and don't care much for Mrs. Grundy. She regarded the new abode as a baby house on a large scale, where she was allowed to play her part in the most satisfactory manner. From the moment when, on taking possession of the coveted room, she opened the doors of the three-cornered closet and found a little kettle just like Polly's standing there, she felt that a good time was coming for her, and fell to dusting furniture, washing cups, and making toast, the happiest, fussiest little housewife in the city. For Maud inherited the notable gifts of her grandmother, and would have made a capital farmer's daughter, in spite of her city breeding. Polly came and went through all these changes, faithful, helpful, and as cheery as she could be when her friends were in trouble. The parts seemed reversed now, and it was Polly who gave, Fanny who received. For where everything seemed strange and new to Fan, Polly was quite at home, and every one of the unfashionable domestic accomplishments now came into play, to the comfort of the Shaws and the great satisfaction of Polly. She could not do enough to prove her gratitude for former favors, and went toiling and moiling about, feeling that the hardest, most disagreeable tasks were her especial duty. In the moving, nothing suited her better than to trot up and down, lugging heavy things, to pound her fingers black and blue nailing carpets and curtains, and the day she nearly broke her neck tumbling down the cellar stairs, in her eagerness to see that Mrs. Shaw's wine was rightly stored, she felt that she was only paying her debts, and told Tom she liked it, when he picked her up looking as grimy as a chimney sweep. "You can turn your hand to anything, you clever girl, so do come and give me some advice, for I am in the depths of despair," said Fanny, when the maid-of-all-work, as Polly called herself, found a leisure hour. "What is it? Moths in the furs, a smoky chimney, or smallpox next door?" asked Polly, as they entered Fan's room, where Maud was trying on old bonnets before the looking-glass. "Actually, I have nothing to wear," began Fan impressively. "I've been too busy to think or care till now, but here it is nearly May, and I have hardly a decent rag to my back. Usually, you know, I just go to Mrs. O'Grady and tell her what I want. She makes my spring wardrobe, Papa pays the bill, and there I am. Now I've looked into the matter, and I declare to you, Polly, I'm frightened to see how much it costs to dress me." "Not as much as some girls I know," said Polly encouragingly. "Perhaps not, for I have a conscience, and taste is economy sometimes. But really, Polly, I haven't the heart to ask Papa for a cent just now, and yet I must have clothes. You are such a genius for planning and working wonders that I throw myself upon you and ask, how shall I make a spring wardrobe out of nothing?" "Let me see the nothing before I advise. Bring out every rag you've got, and we'll see what can be done," said Polly, looking as if she enjoyed the prospect, for she had a great deal of that feminine faculty which we call knack, and much practice had increased it. Fanny brought out her rags, and was astonished to see how many she had, for chair, sofa, bed, and bureau were covered, and still Maud, who was burrowing in the closets, kept crying, "Here's another." "There's a discouraging heap of rubbish for you," said Fan, as she added a faded muslin to the last pile. "Now to me, your rubbish looks very encouraging, because there is good material there, and not much worn-out finery. That's my detestation, for you can't do anything with it. Let me see. 5 bonnets, put the winter ones away till autumn, rip up the summer ones, and out of 3 old ones we'll get a pretty new one, if my eyes don't deceive me." "I'll rip, and then do let me see you make a bonnet. It must be so interesting,"
said Maud, whipping out her scissors and eagerly beginning to reduce a shabby little bonnet to its original elements. "Now the dresses," continued Polly, who had rapidly sorted out the piles. "Will you have the goodness to look at this?" said Fan, holding up a gray street suit, faded past cure. Polly whisked it wrong side out, and showing the clean, bright fabric, said with a triumphant wave, "Behold your new suit. Fresh trimming and less of it will finish you off as smart as ever." "I never wore a turned dress in my life. Do you suppose people will know it?" said Fan doubtfully. "What if they do? It won't hurt you. Not 1 in 100 will ever think anything about your dress except that it is pretty. I've turned and dyed gowns all my days, and it doesn't seem to have alienated my friends or injured my constitution." "That it hasn't. I'm a goose, Polly, and I'll get over the feeling that it's sort of disgraceful to be poor and have to economize. We'll turn the gray, and I'll wear it bravely. Then it will be more becoming than ever. Oh, here's the pretty violet silk. That will make a lovely suit," cried Polly, going on with the review. "Don't see how 2 draggled skirts and a stained waist can be transformed into a whole rig," said Fan, sitting on the bed, with her garments strewn about her in various attitudes of limp despondency. "Well, ma'am, my plan is this," began Polly, imitating Mrs. O'Grady's important tone and bad grammar. "Gores is out and plaits is in. Therefore, as the top of this skirt is quite fresh, we will take off the ruffles, turn it upside down, and leave it plain. The upper skirt will be made scanter and finished with a frill. Then the waist can be refreshed with the best parts of these wide flounces, and out of those new bits we will concoct a hat. The black lace Maud has just taken off the green one will do to edge the violet, and with your nice silk mantilla you are complete, don't you see?" "I don't quite see it yet, but I have firm faith that I shall in time, and consider my calling costume finished," said Fanny, getting more and more interested as she saw her condemned wardrobe coming out fresh again under Polly's magic knack. "There are 2. Then that piquant is all right if you cut the tail off the jacket and change the trimming a bit. The muslins only need mending and doing up to look as well as ever. You ought not to put them away torn and soiled, my child. The 2 black silks will be good standbys for years. If I were you, I'd have a couple of neat, pretty prints for homeware, and then I don't see why you aren't fixed well enough for our short season." "Can't I do anything with this barège? It's one of my favorite dresses, and I hate to give it up." "You wore that thoroughly out, and it's only fit for the rag-bag. Yes, it was very pretty and becoming, I remember, but its day is over." Fanny let the dress lie in her lap a minute, as she absently picked at the fringe, smiling to herself over the happy time when she wore it last, and Sidney said she only needed cowslips in her lap to look like spring. Presently she folded it up and put it away with a sigh, but it never went into the rag-bag, and my sentimental readers can understand what saved it. "The ball dresses had better be put nicely away till next year," began Polly, coming to a rainbow-colored heap. "My day is over. I shall never use them again. Do what you like with them," said Fan calmly. "Did you ever sell your cast-off finery as many ladies do?" asked Polly. "Never. I don't like the fashion. I give it away or let Maud have it for tableaux. I wonder if you would mind my telling you something Belle proposed." "If it's an offer to buy my clothes, I should mind," answered Fanny sharply. "Then I won't." And Polly retired behind a cloud of arsenic-green gauze, which made her look as if she had the cholera. "If she wanted to buy that horrid new gooseberry-colored gown, as Tom calls it, I'd let her have it cheap," put in Maud, who was of a practical turn. "Does she want it, Polly?" asked Fan, whose curiosity got the better of her pride. "Well, she merely asked me if I thought you'd be mortally offended if she offered to take it off your hands, as you'd never worn it. You don't like it, and in another season it will be all out of fashion," said Polly from her verdant retreat. "What did you say?" "I saw she meant it kindly, so I said I'd ask. Now, between ourselves, Fan, the price of that dress would give you all you'll want for your spring fixings. That's one consideration. Then here's another which may have some weight with you," added Polly slyly. Trix told Belle she was going to ask you for the dress, as you wouldn't care to wear it now. That made Belle fire up and say it was a mean thing to do without offering some return for a costly thing like that. And then Belle said, in her blunt way, "I'll give Fan all she paid for it, and more, too, if it will be any help to her. I don't care for the dress, but I'd like to slip a little money into her pocket, for I know she needs it and is too good to ask dear Mr. Shaw for anything she can get on without." "Did she say that? I'll give her the dress and not take a penny for it," cried Fan, flushing up with mingled anger toward Trix and gratitude to Belle. "That won't suit her. You let me manage it, and don't feel any shame or anxiety about it. You did many a kind and generous thing for Belle when you had the power, and you liked to do it. Now let her pay her debts and have the same pleasure." "If she looks at it in that way, it makes a difference. Perhaps I'd better. The money would be an immense help, only I don't quite like to take it. Kings and queens sell their jewels when times are hard or they get turned off their thrones, and no one thinks it anything amiss, so why need you? It's just a little transaction between two friends who exchange things they don't want for things which they do, and I'd do it if I were you." "We'll see about it," said Fan, privately resolving to take Polly's advice. "If I had lots of things like Fan, I'd have an auction and get all I could for them. Why don't you?" asked Maud, beginning on her third bonnet. "We will," said Polly, and mounting a chair, she put up, bid in, and knocked down Fan's entire wardrobe to an imaginary group of friends, with such droll imitations of each one that the room rang with laughter. "That's enough nonsense. Now we'll return to business," said Polly, descending breathless but satisfied with the effect of her fun. "These white muslins and pretty silks will keep for years, so I should lay them by till they are needed. It will save buying, and you can go to your stock any time and make over what you want. That's the way Mother does. We've always had things sent us from richer friends, and whatever wasn't proper for us to wear at the time, Mother put away to be used when we needed it. Such funny bundles as we used to have sometimes, odd shoes, bonnets without crowns, stockings without heels or toes, and old finery of all sorts. We used to rush when a bundle came and sit round while Mother opened it. The boys always made fun of the things, though they were as grateful really as any of us. Will made a verse one day, which we thought pretty well for a little chap. "To poor country folks who haven't any clothes, rich folks, to relieve them, send old lace gowns and satin bows." "I think that Will is going to be as nice a poet as Mr. Shakespeare," remarked Maud in a tone of serious conviction. "He is already a Milton, but I don't believe he will ever be anything but a poet in name," said Polly, working away while she talked. "Didn't your mother ever let you wear the nice things that came?" asked Maud. "No, she thought it wasn't the thing for a poor minister's girls to go flourishing about in second-hand finery, so she did what I'm doing now, put away what would be useful and proper for us by and by, and let us play with the shabby silk bonnets and dirty flounced gowns. Such fun as we used to have up in our big garret. I remember one day we'd been playing have a ball, and were all rigged up, even the boys. Some new neighbors came to call and expressed a wish to see us, having been told that we were pattern children. Mother called us, but we had paraded out into the garden after our ball and were having a concert, as we sat about on the cabbages for green satin seats, so we didn't hear the call, and just as the company was going, a great noise arrested them on the doorstep, and round the corner of the house rattled Ned in full costume, wheeling Kitty in a barrow, while Jimmy, Will, and I ran screaming after, looking like bedlamites, for we were playing that Lady Fitzperkins had fainted and was being borne home senseless in a cab. I thought Mother would kill herself with laughing, and you can imagine what an impression the strangers received of the model children. Maud was so tickled with this youthful prank that she unguardedly sat down to laugh on the edge of an open trunk, immediately doubled up, fell in, and was with difficulty extricated. "People in the country have a great deal nicer times than we do. I never rode in a wheelbarrow, I never sat on cabbages, and I don't think it's fair," she said with an injured expression. You needn't save any old silk gowns for me. I don't mean to be a fine lady when I grow up. I'm going to be a farmer's wife, and make butter and cheese, and have 10 children and raise pigs," she added in one enthusiastic burst. "I do believe she will, if she can find a farmer anywhere," said Fanny. "Oh, I'm going to have Will. I asked him, and he said all right. He's going to preach Sundays and work on the farm the rest of the time." "Well, he is, so you needn't laugh, for we've made all our plans," said Maud, with comical dignity, as she tried the effect of an old white bonnet, wondering if farmers' wives could wear ostrich feathers when they went to meeting. "Blessed innocence! Don't you wish you were a child and dared tell what you want?" murmured Fanny. "I wish I had seen Will's face when Maud proposed," answered Polly, with a nod which answered her friend's speech better than her words. "Any news of anybody?" whispered Fan, affecting to examine a sleeve with care. "Still at the South. Don't think late events have been reported yet. That accounts for absence," answered Polly. "I think Sir Philip was hit harder than was supposed," said Fan. "I doubt it, but time cures wounds of that sort amazing quick. Wish it did." "Who is Sir Philip?" demanded Maud, pricking up her ears. "A famous man who lived in the time of Queen Elizabeth," answered Fan, with a look at Polly. "Oh." And Maud seemed satisfied, but the sharp child had her suspicions, nevertheless. "There will be an immense deal of work in all this fixing over, and I hate to sew," said Fanny, to divert a certain person's thoughts. "Jenny and I are going to help. We are your debtors, as well as Belle, and demand the privilege of paying up. Blessings, like curses, come home to roost, Fan." "Mine come home a good deal bigger than they went," answered Fanny, looking pleased that little favors should be so faithfully remembered. "The interest on that sort of investment rolls up beautifully, you know. Now rip that dress for Jenny to put in order, and I'll toss you up a bonnet in less than no time," said Polly, determined to have things go smoothly, for she knew Fan's feelings had been a good deal tried lately, in many ways. "I must have something to match my dress, and blue inside," said Fanny, bringing out her ribbon boxes. "Anything you like, my dear. When it comes to bonnets, I am usually inspired. I have it. There we are, and nothing could be nicer," cried Polly, making a dive among the silks Fan was turning over with a lost expression. "This bit of silver gray is all I ask. Here's enough for a killing bonnet, and those forget-me-nots are both pretty and appropriate." "You wretch, be still," cried Fanny, as Polly looked up at her with a wicked laugh in her eyes. "It will be done in time, and the dress likewise, so look your prettiest and accept my blessing," continued Polly, seeing that Fan liked her raillery. "Time for what?" asked Paulina Pry. "Your wedding, dear," sweetly answered Fan, for Polly's pleasant hints and predictions put her in a charming humor, and even made old clothes of little consequence. Maud gave an incredulous sniff, and wondered why big girls need to be so dreadful mysterious about their old secrets. "This silk reminds me of Kitty's performance last summer. A little checked silk was sent in our spring bundle from Mrs. Davenport, and Mother said Kit might have it if she could make it do. So I washed it nicely, and we fussed and planned, but it came short by half of one sleeve. I gave it up, but Kit went to work and matched every scrap that was left so neatly that she got out the half sleeve, put it on the underside, and no one was the wiser. How many pieces do you think she put in, Maud?" 50, was the wise reply. "No, only 10, but that was pretty well for a 14-year-old dressmaker. You ought to have seen the little witch laugh in her sleeve when anyone admired the dress, for she wore it all summer and looked as pretty as a pink in it. Such things are great fun when you get used to them. Besides, contriving sharpens your wits and makes you feel as if you had more hands than most people." "I think we'll get a farm near your house. I should like to know Kitty," said Maud, feeling a curious interest in a girl who made such peculiar patchwork. "The dress parade is over, and I'm ever so much obliged to you, Polly, for helping me through and showing me how to make the best of things. I hope in time to have as many hands as you," said Fan gratefully, when the simple bonnet was done and everything planned out ready to be finished. I hope you will soon have 2 good strong ones beside your own, my dear," answered Polly, as she vanished with a parting twinkle that kept Fan's face bright all day. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17. Playing Grandmother. I think Tom had the hardest time of all, for besides the family troubles, he had many of his own to perplex and harass him. College scrapes were soon forgotten in greater afflictions, but there were plenty of tongues to blame that extravagant dog, and plenty of heads to wag ominously over prophecies of the good time Tom Shaw would now make on the road to ruin. As reporters flourish in this country, of course Tom soon heard all the friendly criticisms passed upon him and his career, and he suffered more than anybody guessed, for the truth that was at the bottom of the gossip filled him with the sharp regret and impotent wrath against himself as well as others, which drives many a proud fellow, so placed, to destruction, or the effort that redeems boyish folly and makes a man of him. Now that he had lost his heritage, Tom seemed to see for the first time how goodly it had been, how rich in power, pleasure, and gracious opportunities. He felt its worth even while he acknowledged, with the sense of justice that is strong in manly men, how little he deserved a gift which he had so misused. He brooded over this a good deal, for, like the bat in the fable, he didn't seem to find any place in the new life which had begun for all. Knowing nothing of business, he was not of much use to his father, though he tried to be, and generally ended by feeling that he was a hindrance, not a help. Domestic affairs were equally out of his line, and the girls, more frank than their father, did not hesitate to tell him he was in the way when he offered to lend a hand anywhere. After the first excitement was over and he had time to think, heart and energy seemed to die out, remorse got hold of him, and, as generous, thoughtless natures are apt to do when suddenly confronted with conscience, he exaggerated his faults and follies into sins of the deepest dye, and fancied he was regarded by others as a villain and an outcast. Pride and penitence made him shrink out of sight as much as possible, for he could not bear pity, even when silently expressed by a friendly hand or kindly eye. He stayed at home a good deal, and loafed about with a melancholy and neglected air, vanished when anyone came, talked very little, and was either pathetically humble or tragically cross. He wanted to do something, but nothing seemed to appear, and while he wanted to get his poise after the downfall, he was so very miserable that I'm afraid, if it had not been for one thing, my poor Tom would have got desperate and been a failure. But when he seemed most useless, outcast, and forlorn, he discovered that one person needed him. One person never found him in the way. One person always welcomed and clung to him with the strongest affection of a very feeble nature. This dependence of his mother's was Tom's salvation at that crisis of his life, and the gossips, who said softly to one another over their muffins and tea, "It really would be a relief to that whole family if poor dear Mrs. Shaw could be mercifully removed," did not know that the invalid's weak, idle hands were unconsciously keeping the son safe in that quiet room where she gave him all that she had to give, mother love, till he took heart again and faced the world ready to fight his battles manfully. "Dear, dear, how old and bent poor father does look. I hope you won't forget to order my sweetbread," sighed Mrs. Shaw one day as she watched her husband slowly going down the street. Tom, who stood by her idly spinning the curtain tassel, followed the familiar figure with his eye, and seeing how gray the hair had grown, how careworn the florid face, and how like a weary old man his once strong, handsome father walked, he was smitten by a new pang of self-reproach, and with his usual impetuosity set out repairing the omission as soon as he discovered it. "I'll see to your sweetbread, Mum. Good-bye, back to dinner." And with a hasty kiss, Tom was off. He didn't know exactly what he meant to do, but it had suddenly come over him that he was hiding from the storm and letting his father meet it alone. For the old man went to his office every day with the regularity of a machine that would go its usual round until it stopped, while the young man stayed at home with the women and let his mother comfort him. He has a right to be ashamed of me, but I act as if I was ashamed of him. Dare say people think so. I'll show them that I ain't. Yes, by the powers I will. And Tom drew on his gloves with the air of a man about to meet and conquer an enemy. Have an arm, sir? If you don't mind, I'll walk down with you. Little commission for Mother. Nice day, isn't it? Tom rather broke down at the end of his speech, for the look of pleased surprise with which his father greeted him, the alacrity with which he accepted and leaned on the strong arm offered him, proved that the daily walks had been solitary and doubtless sad ones. I think Mr. Shaw understood the real meaning of that little act of respect, and felt better for the hopeful change it seemed to foretell. But he took it quietly, and leaving his face to speak for him, merely said, "Thank you, Tom. Yes, Mother will enjoy her dinner twice as much if you order it." Then they began to talk business with all their might, as if they feared that some trace of sentiment might disgrace their masculine dignity. But it made no difference whether they discussed lawsuits or love, mortgages or mothers. The feeling was all right, and they knew it. So Mr. Shaw walked straighter than usual, and Tom felt that he was in his proper place again. The walk was not without its trials, however, for while it did Tom's heart good to see the cordial respect paid to his father, it tried his patience sorely to see also inquisitive or disapproving glances fixed upon himself when hats were lifted to his father, and to hear the hearty, "Good day, Mr. Shaw," drop into a cool or careless, "That's the son, it's hard on him, wild fellow, do him good." "Granted, but you needn't hit a man when he's down," muttered Tom to himself, feeling every moment a stronger desire to do something that should silence everybody. "I'd cut away to Australia if it wasn't for Mother. Anything, anywhere to get out of the way of people who know me. I never can right myself here, with all the fellows watching and laying wagers whether I sink or swim. Hang Greek and Latin. Wish I'd learned a trade and had something to fall back on. Haven't a blessed thing now but decent French and my fists. Wonder if old Bell don't want a clerk for the Paris branch of the business. That wouldn't be bad. Faith, I'll try it." And when Tom had landed his father safely at the office, to the great edification of all beholders, he screwed up his courage and went to prefer his request, feeling that the prospect brightened a little. But Mr. Bell was not in a good humor, and only gave Tom a severe lecture on the error of his ways, which sent him home much depressed, and caused the horizon to lower again. As he roamed about the house that afternoon trying to calculate how much an Australian outfit would cost, the sound of lively voices and clattering spoons attracted him to the kitchen. There he found Polly giving Maud lessons in cookery, for the new help, not being a high-priced article, could not be depended on for desserts, and Mrs. Shaw would have felt as if the wolf was at the door if there was not a sweet dish at dinner. Maud had a genius for cooking, and Fanny hated it, so that little person was in her glory, studying receipt books and taking lessons whenever Polly could give them. "Gracious me, Tom, don't come now, we are awful busy. Men don't belong in kitchens," cried Maud as her brother appeared in the doorway. "Couldn't think what you were about. Mum is asleep and Fan out, so I loafed down to see if there was any fun afoot," said Tom, lingering as if the prospect was agreeable. He was a social fellow, and very grateful just then to anyone who helped him forget his worries for a time. Polly knew this, felt that his society would not be a great affliction to herself at least, and whispering to Maud, "He won't know," she added aloud, "Come in if you like, and stir this cake for me. It needs a strong hand, and mine are tired. There, put on that apron to keep you tidy. Sit here and take it easy." "I used to help Grandma bat up cake, and rather liked it, if I remember right," said Tom, letting Polly tie a checked apron on him, put a big bowl into his hands, and settle him near the table where Maud was picking raisins, and she herself stirring busily about among spice-boxes, rolling-pins, and butter-pots. "You do it beautifully, Tom. I'll give you a conundrum to lighten your labor. Why are bad boys like cake?" asked Polly, anxious to cheer him up. because a good beating makes them better. I doubt that myself, though," answered Tom, nearly knocking the bottom of the bowl out with his energetic demonstrations, for it really was a relief to do something. "Bright boy, here's a plum for you," and Polly threw a plump raisin into his mouth. "Put in lots, won't you? I'm rather fond of plum cake," observed Tom, likening himself to Hercules with the distaff, and finding his employment pleasant, if not classical. "I always do if I can. There's nothing I like better than to shovel in sugar and spice and make nice, plummy cake for people. It's one of the few things I have a gift for." "You've hit it this time, Polly. You certainly have a gift for putting a good deal of both articles into your own and other people's lives, which is lucky, as we all have to eat that sort of cake, whether we like it or not," observed Tom, so soberly that Polly opened her eyes, and Maud exclaimed, "I do believe he's preaching." "Feel as if I could sometimes," continued Tom. Then his eye fell upon the dimples in Polly's elbows, and he added with a laugh, "That's more in your line, ma'am. Can't you give us a sermon?" "A short one. Life, my brethren, is like plum cake," began Polly, impressively folding her floury hands. "In some the plums are all on the top, and we eat them gaily, till we suddenly find they are gone. In others the plums sink to the bottom, and we look for them in vain as we go on, and often come to them when it is too late to enjoy them. But in the well-made cake, the plums are wisely scattered all through, and every mouthful is a pleasure. We make our own cakes in a great measure. Therefore let us look to it, my brethren, that they are mixed according to the best receipt, baked in a well-regulated oven, and gratefully eaten with a temperate appetite." "Good, good," cried Tom, applauding with the wooden spoon. "That's a model sermon, Polly. Short, sweet, sensible, and not a bit sleepy. I'm one of your parish, and we'll see that you get your celery punctual, as old Deacon Morse used to say." "Thank you, brother. My wants is few, and ravens scarcer than they used to be," as the dear old Parson Miller used to answer. "Now, Maud, bring on the citron." And Polly began to put the cake together in what seemed a most careless and chaotic manner, while Tom and Maud watched with absorbing interest till it was safely in the oven. "Now make your custards, dear. Tom may like to beat the eggs for you. It seems to have a good effect upon his constitution." "First rate, hand 'em along." And Tom smoothed his apron with a cheerful air. "By the way, Sid's got back. I met him yesterday, and he treated me like a man and a brother," he added, as if anxious to contribute to the pleasures of the hour. "I'm so glad," cried Polly, clapping her hands regardless of the egg she held, which dropped and smashed on the floor at her feet. "Oh, careless thing. Pick it up, Maud. I'll get some more." And Polly whisked out of the room, glad of an excuse to run and tell Fan, who had just come in, lest, hearing the news in public, she might be startled out of the well-bred composure with which young ladies are expected to receive tidings, even of the most vital importance. "You know all about history, don't you?" asked Maud suddenly. "Not quite," modestly answered Tom. "I just want to know if there really was a man named Sir Philip in the time of Queen Elizabeth." "You mean Sir Philip Sidney? Yes, he lived then, and a fine old fellow he was, too." "There, I knew the girls didn't mean him," cried Maud, with a chop that sent the citron flying. "What mischief are you up to now, you little magpie?" "I shan't tell you what they said, because I don't remember much of it. But I heard Polly and Fan talking about someone dreadful mysterious, and when I asked who it was, Fan said Sir Philip. Oh, she needn't think I believe it. I saw 'em laugh and blush and poke one another, and I know it wasn't about any old Queen Elizabeth man," cried Maud, turning up her nose as far as that somewhat limited feature would go. "Look here, you are letting cats out of the bag. Never mind, I thought so. They don't tell us their secrets, but we are so sharp we can't help finding them out, can we?" said Tom, looking so much interested that Maud couldn't resist airing her knowledge a little. "Well, I dare say it isn't proper for you to know, but I am old enough now to be told anything, and those girls better mind what they say, for I'm not a stupid chit like Blanche. I just wish you could have heard them go on. I'm sure there's something very nice about Mr. Sidney. They looked so pleased when they whispered and giggled on the bed and thought I was ripping bonnets and didn't hear a word." "Which looked most pleased?" asked Tom, investigating the kitchen boiler with deep interest. "Well, 'pears to me Polly did. She talked most and looked funny and very happy all the time. Fan laughed a good deal, but I guess Polly is the loveress," replied Maud after a moment's reflection. "Hold your tongue, she's coming," and Tom began to pump as if the house was on fire. Down came Polly with heightened color, bright eyes, and not a single egg. Tom took a quick look at her over his shoulder and paused as if the fire was suddenly extinguished. Something in his face made Polly feel a little guilty, so she fell to grating nutmeg with a vigor which made red cheeks the most natural thing in life. Maud, the traitor, sat demurely at work, looking very like what Tom had called her, a magpie with mischief in its head. Polly felt a change in the atmosphere, but merely thought Tom was tired, so she graciously dismissed him with a stick of cinnamon, as she had nothing else just then to lay upon the shrine. "Fan's got the books and maps you wanted. Go and rest now, I'm much obliged. Here's your wages, Bridget." "Good luck to your messes," answered Tom as he walked away, meditatively crunching his cinnamon and looking as if he did not find it as spicy as usual. He got his books but did not read them, for, shutting himself up in the little room called Tom's Den, he just sat down and brooded. When he came down to breakfast the next morning, he was greeted with a general "Happy birthday, Tom," and at his place lay gifts from every member of the family. Not as costly as formerly, perhaps, but infinitely dearer, as tokens of the love that had outlived the change and only grown the warmer for the test of misfortune. In his present state of mind, Tom felt as if he did not deserve a blessed thing, so when everyone exerted themselves to make it a happy day for him, he understood what it means to be nearly killed with kindness, and sternly resolved to be an honor to his family or perish in the attempt. Evening brought Polly to what she called a festive tea, and when they gathered round the table, another gift appeared, which, though not of a sentimental nature, touched Tom more than all the rest. It was a most delectable cake, with a nosegay atop, and round it on the snowy frosting there ran a pink inscription, just as it had been every year since Tom could remember. "Name, age, and date, like a nice white tombstone," observed Maud complacently, at which funereal remark Mrs. Shaw, who was down in honor of the day, dropped her napkin and demanded her salts. "Whose doing is that?" asked Tom, surveying the gift with satisfaction, for it recalled the happier birthdays which seemed very far away now. "I didn't know what to give you, for you've got everything a man wants, and I was in despair till I remembered that dear Grandma always made you a little cake like that, and that you once said it wouldn't be a happy birthday without it. So I tried to make it just like hers, and I do hope it will prove a good, sweet, plummy one." "Thank you," was all Tom said, as he smiled at the giver. But Polly knew that her present had pleased him more than the most elegant trifle she could have made. "It ought to be good, for you beat it up yourself, Tom," cried Maud. "It was so funny to see you working away and never guessing who the cake was for. I perfectly trembled every time you opened your mouth for fear you'd ask some question about it. That was the reason Polly preached and I kept talking when she was gone." "Very stupid of me, but I forgot all about today. Suppose we cut it. I don't seem to care for anything else," said Tom, feeling no appetite, but bound to do justice to that cake if he fell a victim to his gratitude. "I hope the plums won't all be at the bottom," said Polly as she rose to do the honors of the cake by universal appointment. "I've had a good many at the top already, you know," answered Tom, watching the operation with as much interest as if he had faith in the omen. Cutting carefully, slice after slice fell apart, each firm and dark, spicy and rich, under the frosty rime above, and laying a specially large piece in one of Grandma's quaint little china plates, Polly added the flowers and handed it to Tom with a look that said a great deal, for, seeing that he remembered her sermon, She was glad to find that her allegory held good, in one sense at least. Tom's face brightened as he took it, and after an inspection which amused the others very much, he looked up, saying with an air of relief, "Plums all through. I'm glad I had a hand in it, but Polly deserves the credit and must wear the posy." And turning to her, he put the rose into her hair with more gallantry than taste, for a thorn pricked her head, the leaves tickled her ear, and the flower was upside down. Fanny laughed at his want of skill, but Polly wouldn't have it altered, and everybody fell to eating cake as if indigestion was one of the lost arts. They had a lively tea, and were getting on famously afterward when 2 letters were brought for Tom, who glanced at one and retired rather precipitately to his den, leaving Maud consumed with curiosity, and the older girls slightly excited, for Fan thought she recognized the handwriting on one, and Polly on the other. 1 half an hour, and then another elapsed, and Tom did not return. Mr. Shaw went out. Mrs. Shaw retired to her room, escorted by Maud, and the 2 girls sat together, wondering if anything dreadful had happened. All of a sudden, a voice called, "Polly," and that young lady started out of her chair as if the sound had been a thunderclap. "Do run. I'm perfectly fainting to know what the matter is," said Fan. "You'd better go," began Polly, wishing to obey, yet feeling a little shy. "He don't want me. Besides, I couldn't say a word for myself if that letter was from Sidney," cried Fanny, hustling her friend toward the door in a great flutter. Polly went without another word, but she wore a curiously anxious look, and stopped on the threshold of the den, as if a little afraid of its occupant. Tom was sitting in his favorite attitude, astride of a chair, with his arms folded and his chin on the top rail. Not an elegant posture, but the only one in which, he said, he could think well. "Did you want me, Tom?" "Yes, come in, please, and don't look scared. I only want to show you a present I've had, and ask your advice about accepting it." "Why, Tom, you look as if you had been knocked down," exclaimed Polly, forgetting all about herself as she saw his face when he rose and turned to meet her. "I have, regularly floored, but I'm up again, and steadier than ever. Just you read that, and tell me what you think of it." Tom snatched a letter off the table, put it into her hands, and began to walk up and down the little room, like a veritable bear in its cage. As Polly read that short note, all the color went out of her face, and her eyes began to kindle. When she came to the end, she stood a minute, as if too indignant to speak, then gave the paper a nervous sort of crumple and dropped it on the floor, saying, all in one breath, "I think she is a mercenary, heartless, ungrateful girl, that's what I think." "Oh, the deuce, I didn't mean to show that one, it's the other." And Tom took up a second paper, looking half angry, half ashamed at his own mistake. "I don't care, though. Everyone will know tomorrow, and perhaps you'll be good enough to keep the girls from bothering me with questions and gabble," he added, as if, on second thoughts, he was relieved to have the communication made to Polly first. "I don't wonder you look upset. If the other letter is as bad, I'd better have a chair before I read it," said Polly, feeling that she began to tremble with excitement. "It's a million times better, but it knocked me worse than the other. Kindness always does." Tom stopped short there, and stood a minute turning the letter about in his hand, as if it contained a sweet which neutralized the bitter in that smaller note, and touched him very much. Then he drew up an armchair, and beckoning Polly to take it, said in a sober, steady tone that surprised her greatly, "Whenever I was in a quandary, I used to go and consult Grandma, and she always had something sensible or comfortable to say to me. She's gone now, but somehow, Polly, you seem to take her place. Would you mind sitting in her chair and letting me tell you 2 or 3 things, as Will does?" Mind it. Polly felt that Tom had paid her the highest and most beautiful compliment he could have devised. She had often longed to do it, for, being brought up in the most affectionate and frank relations with her brothers, she had early learned what it takes most women some time to discover, that sex does not make nearly as much difference in the hearts and souls as we fancy. joy and sorrow, love and fear, life and death, bring so many of the same needs to all that the wonder is we do not understand each other better, but wait till times of tribulation teach us that human nature is very much the same in men and women. Thanks to this knowledge, Polly understood Tom in a way that surprised and won him. She knew that he wanted womanly sympathy, and that she could give it to him, because she was not afraid to stretch her hand across the barrier which our artificial education puts between boys and girls, and to say to him in all good faith, "If I can help you, let me." 10 minutes sooner Polly could have done this almost as easily to Tom as to Will, but in that 10 minutes something had happened which made this difficult. Reading that Trix had given Tom back his freedom changed many things to Polly, and caused her to shrink from his confidence, because she felt as if it would be harder now to keep self out of sight, for, spite of maiden modesty, love and hope would wake and sing at the good news. Slowly she sat down, and hesitatingly she said with her eyes on the ground in a very humble voice, "I'll do my best, but I can't fill Grandma's place or give you any wise, good advice. I wish I could." "You'll do it better than anyone else. Talk troubles, Mother. Father has enough to think of without any of my worries. Fan is a good soul, but she isn't practical, and we always get into a snarl if we try to work together. So who have I but my other sister Polly? The pleasure that letter will give you may make up for my boring you." As he spoke, Tom laid the other paper in her lap, and went off to the window, as if to leave her free to enjoy it unseen. But he could not help a glance now and then, and as Polly's face brightened, his own fell. "Oh, Tom, that's a birthday present worth having, for it's so beautifully given I don't see how you can refuse it. Arthur Sidney is a real nobleman," cried Polly, looking up at last, with her face glowing and her eyes full of delight. "So he is. I don't know another man living except Father who would have done such a thing, or who I could bring myself to take it from. Do you see, he's not only paid the confounded debts, but has done it in my name to spare me all he could." "I see. It's like him. And I think he must be very happy to be able to do such a thing. It's an immense weight off my shoulders, for some of those men couldn't afford to wait till I'd begged, borrowed, or earned the money. Sidney can wait, but he won't long if I know myself." "You won't take it as a gift, then?" "Would you?" "No." "Then don't think I will. I'm a pretty poor affair, Polly, but I'm not mean enough to do that while I've got a conscience and a pair of hands." A rough speech, but it pleased Polly better than the smoothest Tom had ever made in her hearing, for something in his face and voice told her that the friendly act had roused a nobler sentiment than gratitude, making the cancelled obligations of the boy debts of honor to the man. "What will you do, Tom?" "I'll tell you. May I sit here?" And Tom took the low footstool that always stood near Grandma's old chair. "I've had so many plans in my head lately that sometimes it seems as if it would split," continued the poor fellow, rubbing his tired forehead, as if to polish up his wits. "I've thought seriously of going to California, Australia, or some out-of-the-way place where men get rich in a hurry." "Oh, no!" cried Polly, putting out her hand as if to keep him, and then snatching it back again before he could turn round. "It would be hard on Mother and the girls, I suppose. Besides, I don't quite like it myself. It looks as if I shirked and ran away." "So it does," said Polly decidedly. "Well, you see, I don't seem to find anything to do unless I turn clerk, and I don't think that would suit. The fact is, I couldn't stand it here where I'm known. It would be easier to scratch gravel on a railroad with a gang of Paddies than to sell pins to my friends and neighbors. False pride, I dare say, but it's the truth, and there's no use in dodging." "Not a bit, and I quite agree with you." "That's comfortable. Now I'm coming to the point where I specially want your advice, Polly. Yesterday I heard you telling Fan about your brother Ned, how well he got on, how he liked his business and wanted Will to come and take some place near him. You thought I was reading, but I heard, and it struck me that perhaps I could get a chance out west somewhere. What do you think?" "If you really mean work, I know you could," answered Polly quickly, as all sorts of plans and projects went sweeping through her mind. "I wish you could be with Ned. You'd get on together, I'm sure, and he'd be so glad to do anything he could. I'll write and ask straight away if you want me to." "Suppose you do. Just for information, you know. Then I shall have something to go upon. I want to have a feasible plan all ready before I speak to Father. There's nothing so convincing to businessmen as facts, you know." Polly could not help smiling at Tom's new tone. It seemed so strange to hear him talking about anything but horses and tailors, dancing and girls. She liked it, however, as much as she did the sober expression of his face, and the way he had lately of swinging his arms about, as if he wanted to do something energetic with them. "That will be wise. Do you think your father will like this plan?" "Pretty sure he will. Yesterday, when I told him I must go at something right off, he said, 'Anything honest, Tom, and don't forget that your father began the world as a shop boy.' You knew that, didn't you?" "Yes, he told me the story once, and I always liked to hear it, because it was pleasant to see how well he had succeeded." "I never did like the story. A little bit ashamed, I'm afraid. But when we talked it over last night, it struck me in a new light, and I understood why Father took the failure so well and seemed so contented with this poorish place. 'It is only beginning again,' he says, and having worked his way up once, he feels as if he could again. I declare to you, Polly, that sort of confidence in himself and energy and courage in a man of his years makes me love and respect the dear old gentleman as I never did before." "I'm so glad to hear you say that, Tom. I've sometimes thought you didn't quite appreciate your father, any more than he knew how much of a man you were." "Never was till today, you know," said Tom, laughing, yet looking as if he felt the dignity of his 21 years. "Odd, isn't it, how people live together ever so long, and don't seem to find one another out till something comes to do it for them. Perhaps this smash-up was sent to introduce me to my own father." "There's philosophy for you," said Polly, smiling, even while she felt as if adversity was going to do more for Tom than years of prosperity. They both sat quiet for a minute, Polly in the big chair looking at him with a new respect in her eyes, Tom on the stool nearby, slowly tearing up a folded paper he had absently taken from the floor while he talked. "Did this surprise you?" he asked, as a little white shower fluttered from his hands. "No." "Well, it did me. For you know, as soon as we came to grief, I offered to release Trix from the engagement, and she wouldn't let me," continued Tom, as if having begun the subject he wished to explain it thoroughly. "That surprised me," said Polly. "So it did me, for Fan always insisted it was the money and not the man she cared for. Her first answer pleased me very much, for I did not expect it, and nothing touches a fellow more than to have a woman stand by him through thick and thin." "She doesn't seem to have done it." Fan was right. Trix only waited to see how bad things really were, or rather, her mother did. She's as cool, hard, and worldly-minded an old soul as I ever saw, and Trix is bound to obey. She gets round it very neatly in her note. "I won't be a burden, will sacrifice her hopes, and always remain my warm friend." But the truth is, Tom Shaw rich was worth making much of, but Tom Shaw poor is in the way, and may go to the devil as fast as he likes. "Well, he isn't going," cried Polly, defiantly, for her wrath burned hotly against Trix, though she blessed her for setting the bondman free. "Came within an ace of it," muttered Tom to himself, adding aloud in a tone of calm resignation that assured Polly his heart would not be broken, though his engagement was. "It never rains but it pours, especially in hard times, but when a man is down, a rap or two more don't matter much, I suppose. It's the first blow that hurts most." "Glad to see you take the last blow so well." There was an ironical little twang to that speech, and Polly couldn't help it. Tom colored up and looked hurt for a minute, then seemed to right himself with a shrug, and said in his outspoken way, To tell the honest truth, Polly, it was not a very hard one. I've had a feeling for some time that Trix and I were not suited to one another, and it might be wiser to stop short, but she did not or would not see it, and I was not going to back out and leave her to wear any more willows. So here we are. I don't bear malice, but hope she'll do better, and not be disappointed again. Upon my word, I do. That's very good of you, quite Sidney-esque and noble, said Polly, feeling rather ill at ease, and wishing she could hide herself behind a cap and spectacles if she was to play grandma to this confiding youth. It will be all plain sailing for Sid, I fancy, observed Tom, getting up as if the little cricket suddenly ceased to be comfortable. I hope so, murmured Polly, wondering what was coming next. He deserves the very best of everything, and I pray the Lord he may get it, added Tom, poking the fire in a destructive manner. Polly made no answer, fearing to pay too much, for she knew Fan had made no confidant of Tom, and she guarded her friend's secret as jealously as her own. You'll write to Ned tomorrow, will you? I'll take anything he's got, for I want to be off, said Tom, casting down the poker and twirling round with a resolute air which was lost on Polly, who sat twirling the rose that had fallen into her lap. I'll write tonight. Would you like me to tell the girls about Trix and Sidney? She asked as she rose, feeling that the council was over. I wish you would. I don't know how to thank you for all you've done for me. I wish to heaven I did, said Tom, holding out his hand with a look that Polly thought a great deal too grateful for the little she had done. As she gave him her hand and looked up at him with those confiding eyes of hers, Tom's gratitude seemed to fly to his head, for without the slightest warning he stooped down and kissed her, a proceeding which startled Polly so that he recovered himself at once, and retreated into his den with the incoherent apology, I beg pardon, couldn't help it, Grandma always let me on my birthday. While Polly took refuge upstairs, forgetting all about Fan, as she sat in the dark with her face hidden, wondering why she wasn't very angry, and resolving never again to indulge in the delightful but dangerous pastime of playing grandmother. End of chapter 17.
Chapter 18. The Woman Who Did Not Dare. Polly wrote enthusiastically, Ned answered satisfactorily, and after much corresponding, talking, and planning, it was decided that Tom should go west. Never mind what the business was, it suffices to say that it was a good beginning for a young man like Tom, who, having been born and bred in the most conservative class of the most conceited city in New England, needed just the healthy, hardy social influences of the West to widen his views and make a man of him. Of course there was much lamentation among the women, but everyone felt it was the best thing for him. So while they sighed, they sewed, packed visions of a brilliant future away with his new pocket-handkerchiefs, and rejoiced that the way was open before him even in the act of bedewing his boots with tears. Sidney stood by him to the last, like a man and a brother, which expression of Tom's gave Fanny infinite satisfaction. And Will felt entirely consoled for Ned's disappointment at his refusal to go and join him, since Tom was to take the place Ned had kept for him. Fortunately, everyone was so busy with the necessary preparations that there was no time for romance of any sort, and the four young people worked together as soberly and sensibly as if all sorts of emotions were not bottled up in their respective hearts. But in spite of the silence, the work, and the hurry, I think they came to know one another better in that busy little space of time than in all the years that had gone before. For the best and the bravest in each was up and stirring, and the small house was as full of the magnetism of love and friendship, self-sacrifice and enthusiasm, as the world outside was full of spring sunshine and enchantment. Pity that the end should come so soon, but the hour did its work and went its way, leaving a clearer atmosphere behind, though the young folks did not see it then, for their eyes were dim because of the partings that must be. Tom was off to the west. Polly went home for the summer. Maud was taken to the seaside with Belle, and Fanny left alone to wrestle with housekeeping, help, and heartache. If it had not been for two things, I fear she never would have stood a summer in town, but Sidney often called till his vacation came, and a voluminous correspondence with Polly beguiled the long days. Tom wrote once a week to his mother, but the letters were short and not very satisfactory, for men never do tell the interesting little things that women best like to hear. Fanny forwarded her bits of news to Polly. Polly sent back all the extracts from Ned's letters concerning Tom, and by putting the two reports together, they gained the comfortable assurance that Tom was well, in good spirits, hard at work, and intent on coming out strong in spite of all obstacles. Polly had a quiet summer at home, resting and getting ready in mind and body for another winter's work, for in the autumn she tried her plan again, to the satisfaction of her pupils and the great joy of her friends. She never said much of herself in her letters, and Fanny's first exclamation when they met again was an anxious, "Why, Polly, dear, have you been sick and never told me?" "No, I'm only tired, had a good deal to do lately, and the dull weather makes me just a trifle blue. I shall soon brighten up when I get to my work again," answered Polly, bustling about to put away her things. "You don't look a bit natural. What have you been doing to your precious little self?" persisted Fanny, troubled by the change, yet finding it hard to say wherein it lay. Polly did not look sick, though her cheeks were thinner and her color paler than formerly, but she seemed spiritless, and there was a tired look in her eyes that went to Fanny's heart. "I'm all right enough, as you'll see when I'm in order. I'm proper glad to find you looking so well and happy. Does all go smoothly, Fan?" asked Polly, beginning to brush her hair industriously. "Answer me one question first," said Fanny, looking as if a sudden fear had come over her. "Tell me truly, have you never repented of your hint to Sidney?" "Never," cried Polly, throwing back the brown veil behind which she had half hidden her face at first. "On your honor as an honest girl?" "On my honor as anything you please. Why do you suspect me of it?" demanded Polly, almost angrily. "Because something is wrong with you. It's no use to deny it, for you've got the look I used to see in that very glass on my own face when I thought he cared for you. Forgive me, Polly, but I can't help saying it, for it is there, and I want to be as true to you as you were to me if I can." Fanny's face was full of agitation, and she spoke fast and frankly, for she was trying to be generous and found it very hard. Polly understood now and put her fear at rest by saying almost passionately, "I tell you I don't love him. If he was the only man in the world I wouldn't marry him, because I don't want to." The last three words were added in a different tone, for Polly had checked herself there with a half-frightened look and turned away to hide her face behind her hair again. "Then if it's not him, it's someone else. You've got a secret, Polly, and I should think you might tell it, as you know mine," said Fanny, unable to rest till everything was told, for Polly's manner troubled her. There was no answer to her question, but she was satisfied, and putting her arm round her friend, she said in her most persuasive tone, "My precious Polly, do I know him?" "You have seen him." "And is he very wise, good, and splendid, dear?" "No." "He ought to be, if you love him. I hope he isn't bad," cried Fan anxiously, still holding Polly, who kept her head obstinately turned. "I'm suited, that's enough." "Oh, please, just tell me one more thing. Don't he love back again?" "No. Now don't say another word, I can't bear it." And Polly drew herself away as she spoke in a desperate sort of tone. "I won't. But now I'm not afraid to tell you that I think, I hope, I do believe that Sidney cares a little for me. He's been very kind to us all, and lately he has seemed to like to see me always when he comes and miss me if I'm gone. I didn't dare to hope anything till Papa observed something in his manner, and he teased me about it. I try not to deceive myself, but it does seem as if there was a chance of happiness for me." "Thank heaven for that," cried Polly, with the heartiest satisfaction in her voice. "Now come and tell me all about it. she added, sitting down on the couch with the air of one who has escaped a great peril. "I've got some notes and things I want to ask your opinion about, if they really mean anything, you know," said Fanny, getting out a bundle of papers from the innermost recesses of her desk. "There's a photograph of Tom came in his last letter. Good, isn't it? He looks older, but that's the beard and the rough coat, I suppose. Dear old fellow. He is doing so well, I really begin to feel quite proud of him." Fan tossed her the photograph and went on rummaging for a certain note. She did not see Polly catch up the picture and look at it with hungry eyes, but she did hear something in the low tone in which Polly said, "It don't do him justice." And glancing over her shoulder, Fan's quick eye caught a glimpse of the truth, though Polly was half turned away from her. Without stopping to think, Fan dropped her letters, took Polly by the shoulders, and cried in a tone full of astonishment, "Polly, is it Tom?" Poor Polly was so taken by surprise that she had not a word to say. None were needed. Her telltale face answered for her, as well as the impulse which made her hide her head in the sofa-cushion, like a foolish ostrich when the hunters are after it. "Oh, Polly, I am so glad! I never thought of it, you are so good, and he's such a wild boy. I can't believe it, but it is so dear of you to care for him." "Couldn't help it. Tried not to, but it was so hard, you know, Fan, you know," said a stifled voice from the depths of the very fuzzy cushion which Tom had once condemned. The last words, and the appealing hand outstretched to her, told Fanny the secret of her friend's tender sympathy for her own love troubles, and seemed so pathetic that she took Polly in her arms and cried over her in the fond, foolish way girls have of doing when their hearts are full and tears can say more than tongues. The silence never lasts long, however, for the feminine desire to talk it over usually gets the better of the deepest emotion. So presently the girls were hard at it, Polly very humble and downcast, Fanny excited and overflowing with curiosity and delight. "Really, my sister! You dear thing, how heavenly that will be!" she cried. "It never will be," answered Polly in a tone of calm despair. "What will prevent it?" "Maria Bailey," was the tragic reply. "What do you mean? Is she the Western girl? She shan't have Tom. I'll kill her first." "Too late. Let me tell you, is that door shut and Maud safe?" Fanny reconnoitered, and returning listened breathlessly while Polly poured into her ear the bitter secret which was preying on her soul. "Hasn't he mentioned Maria in his letters?" "Once or twice, but sort of jokingly, and I thought it was only some little flirtation. He can't have time for much of that fun, he's so busy." "Ned writes good, gossipy letters. I taught him how, and he tells me all that's going on. When he'd spoke of this girl several times, they board with her mother, you know, I asked about her, quite carelessly, and he told me she was pretty, good, and well educated, and he thought Tom was rather smitten. That was a blow. For you see, Fan, since Trix broke the engagement and it wasn't wrong to think of Tom, I let myself hope, just a little, and was so happy. Now I must give it up, and now I see how much I hoped, and what a dreadful loss it's going to be." Two great tears rolled down Polly's cheeks, and Fanny wiped them away, feeling an intense desire to go west by the next train, wither Maria Bailey with a single look, and bring Tom back as a gift to Polly. "It was so stupid of me not to guess before. But you see, Tom always seemed so like a boy, and you are more womanly for your age than any girl I know, so I never thought of your caring for him in that way. I knew you were very good to him. You are to everyone, my precious, and I knew that he was fond of you as he is of me, fonder, if anything, because he thinks you are perfect, but still I never dreamed of his loving you as more than a dear friend." "He doesn't," sighed Polly. "Well, he ought, and if I could get hold of him he should."
Polly clutched Fan at that and held her tight, saying sternly, "If you ever breathe a word, drop a hint, look a look that will tell him or anyone else about me, yes, as sure as my name is Mary Milton, I'll proclaim from the housetops that you like our—" Polly got no further, for Fan's hand was on her mouth, and Fan's alarmed voice vehemently protested, "I won't. I promise solemnly I'll never say a word to a mortal creature. Don't be so fierce, Polly. You quite frighten me. It's bad enough to love someone who don't love you, but to have them told of it is perfectly awful. It makes me wild just to think of it. Oh, Fan, I'm getting so ill-tempered and envious and wicked I don't know what will happen to me." "I'm not afraid for you, my dear, and I do believe things will go right, because you are so good to everyone. How Tom could help adoring you, I don't see. I know he would if he had stayed at home longer after he got rid of Trix. It would be the making of him, but though he is my brother, I don't think he's good enough for you, Polly, and I don't quite see how you can care for him so much when you might have had a person so infinitely superior." "I don't want a superior person. He'd tire me if he was like A.S. Besides, I do think Tom is superior to him in many things. Well, you needn't stare. I know he is, or will be. He's so different, and very young, and has lots of faults, I know, but I like him all the better for it, and he's honest and brave, and has got a big, warm heart, and I'd rather have him care for me than the wisest, best, most accomplished man in the world, simply because I love him." If Tom could only have seen Polly's face when she said that! It was so tender, earnest, and defiant, that Fanny forgot the defense of her own lover in admiration of Polly's loyalty to hers. For this faithful, all-absorbing love was a new revelation to Fanny, who was used to hearing her friends boast of 2 or 3 lovers a year, and calculate their respective values with almost as much coolness as the young men discussed the fortunes of the girls they wished for but could not afford to marry. She had thought her love for Sidney very romantic because she did not really care whether he was rich or poor, though she never dared to say so, even to Polly, for fear of being laughed at. She began to see now what true love was, and to feel that the sentiment which she could not conquer was a treasure to be accepted with reverence and cherished with devotion. "I don't know when I began to love Tom, but I found out that I did last winter, and was as much surprised as you are," continued Polly, as if glad to unburden her heart. "I didn't approve of him at all. I thought he was extravagant, reckless, and dandified. I was very much disappointed when he chose Trix, and the more I thought and saw of it, the worse I felt, for Tom was too good for her, and I hated to see her do so little for him when she might have done so much, because he is one of the men who can be led by their affections, and the woman he marries can make or mar him." "That's true," cried Fan, as Polly paused to look at the picture, which appeared to regard her with a grave, steady look, which seemed rather to belie her assertions. "I don't mean that he's weak or bad. If he was, I should hate him, but he does need someone to love him very much and make him happy, as a good woman best knows how," said Polly, as if answering the mute language of Tom's face. "I hope Maria Bailey is all he thinks her," she added softly, "for I couldn't bear to have him disappointed again." "I dare say he don't care a fig for her, and you are only borrowing trouble. What do you say Ned answered when you asked about this inconvenient girl?" said Fanny, turning hopeful all at once. Polly repeated it, and added, "I asked him in another letter if he didn't admire Miss B. as much as Tom, and he wrote back that she was a nice girl, but he had no time for nonsense, and I needn't get my white kids ready for some years yet, unless to dance at Tom's wedding. Since then he hasn't mentioned Maria, so I was sure there was something serious going on, and being in Tom's confidence, he kept quiet." "It does look bad. Suppose I say a word to Tom, just inquire after his heart in a general way, you know, and give him a chance to tell me if there is anything to tell." "I'm willing, but you must let me see the letter. I can't trust you not to hint or say too much." "You shall. I'll keep my promise in spite of everything, but it will be hard to see things going wrong when a word would set it right." "You know what will happen if you do." And Polly looked so threatening that Fan trembled before her, discovering that the gentlest girls when roused are more impressive than any shrew, for even turtle-doves peck gallantly to defend their nests. "If it is true about Maria, what shall we do?" said Fanny after a pause. "Bear it. People always do bear things, somehow," answered Polly, looking as if sentence had been passed upon her. "But if it isn't?" cried Fan, unable to endure the sight. "Then I shall wait." And Polly's face changed so beautifully that Fan hugged her on the spot, fervently wishing that Maria Bailey never had been born. Then the conversation turned to lover number 2, and after a long confabulation Polly gave it as her firm belief that A.S. had forgotten M.M. and was rapidly finding consolation in the regard of F.S. With this satisfactory decision the council ended after the ratification of a loyal league, by which the friends pledged themselves to stand staunchly by one another through the trials of the coming year. It was a very different winter from the last for both the girls. Fanny applied herself to her duties with redoubled ardor, for A.S. was a domestic man and admired housewifely accomplishments. If Fanny wanted to show him what she could do toward making a pleasant home, she certainly succeeded better than she suspected, for in spite of many failures and discouragements behind the scenes, the little house became a most attractive place, to Mr. Sidney at least, for he was more the house friend than ever, and seemed determined to prove that change of fortune made no difference to him. Fanny had been afraid that Polly's return might endanger her hopes, but Sidney met Polly with the old friendliness, and very soon convinced her that the nipping-in-the-bud process had been effectual, for being taken early, the sprouting affection had died easy, and left room for an older friendship to blossom into a happier love. Fanny seemed glad of this, and Polly soon set her heart at rest by proving that she had no wish to try her power. She kept much at home when the day's work was done, finding it pleasanter to sit dreaming over book or sewing alone than to exert herself even to go to the Shaws. "Fan don't need me, and Sidney don't care whether I come or not, so I'll keep out of the way," she would say, as if to excuse her seeming indolence. Polly was not at all like herself that winter, and those nearest to her saw and wondered at it most. Will got very anxious, she was so quiet, pale, and spiritless, and distracted poor Polly by his affectionate stupidity till she completed his bewilderment by getting cross and scolding him. So he consoled himself with Maud, who, now being in her teens, assumed dignified airs, and ordered him about in a style that afforded him continued amusement and employment. Western news continued vague, for Fan's general inquiries produced only provokingly unsatisfactory replies from Tom, who sang the praises of the beautiful Miss Bailey, and professed to be consumed by a hopeless passion for somebody, in such half-comic, half-tragic terms, that the girls could not decide whether it was all that boy's mischief, or only a cloak to hide the dreadful truth. "We'll have it out of him when he comes home in the spring," said Fanny to Polly, as they compared the letters of their brothers, and agreed that men were the most uncommunicative and provoking animals under the sun, for Ned was so absorbed in business that he ignored the whole Bailey question, and left them in utter darkness. Hunger of any sort is a hard thing to bear, especially when the sufferer has a youthful appetite, and Polly was kept on such a short allowance of happiness for 6 months that she got quite thin and interesting, and often when she saw how big her eyes were getting and how plainly the veins on her temples showed, indulged the pensive thought that perhaps spring dandelions might blossom o'er her grave. She had no intention of dying till Tom's visit was over, however, and as the time drew near,
She went through such alternations of hope and fear, and lived in such a state of feverish excitement, that spirits and color came back, and she saw that the interesting pallor she had counted on would be an entire failure. May came at last, and with it a burst of sunshine which cheered even poor Polly's much-enduring heart. Fanny came walking in upon her one day, looking as if she brought tidings of such great joy that she hardly knew how to tell them. "Prepare yourself. Somebody is engaged," she said, in a solemn tone that made Polly put up her hand as if to ward off an expected blow. "No, don't look like that, my poor dear. It isn't Tom. It's I." Of course there was a rapture, followed by one of the deliciously confidential talks which bosom friends enjoy, interspersed with tears and kisses, smiles and sighs. "Oh, Polly, though I've waited and hoped so long, I couldn't believe it when it came, and don't deserve it, but I will, for the knowledge that he loves me seems to make everything possible," said Fanny, with an expression which made her really beautiful for the first time in her life. "You happy girl," sighed Polly, then smiled and added, "I think you deserve all that's come to you, for you have truly tried to be worthy of it, and whether it ever came or not, that would have been a thing to be proud of." "He says that is what made him love me," answered Fanny, never calling her lover by his name, but making the little personal pronoun a very sweet word by the tone in which she uttered it. "He was disappointed in me last year, he told me, but you said good things about me, and though he didn't care much then, yet when he lost you and came back to me, he found that you were not altogether mistaken, and he has watched me all this winter, learning to respect and love me better every day. Oh, Polly, when he said that I couldn't bear it, because in spite of all my trying I'm still so weak and poor and silly. We don't think so, and I know you'll be all he hopes to find you, for he's just the husband you ought to have." "Thank you all the more, then, for not keeping him yourself," said Fanny, laughing the old blithe laugh again. "That was only a slight aberration of his. He knew better all the time. It was your white cloak and my idiotic behavior the night we went to the opera that put the idea into his head," said Polly, feeling as if the events of that evening had happened some 20 years ago, when she was a giddy young thing fond of gay bonnets and girlish pranks. "I'm not going to tell Tom a word about it, but keep it for a surprise till he comes. He will be here next week, and then we'll have a grand clearing up of mysteries," said Fan, evidently feeling that the millennium was at hand. "Perhaps," said Polly, as her heart fluttered and then sunk, for this was a case where she could do nothing but hope, and keep her hands busy with Will's new set of shirts. There is a good deal more of this sort of silent suffering than the world suspects, for the women who dare are few, the women who stand and wait are many. But if work-baskets were gifted with powers of speech, they could tell stories more true and tender than any we read. For women often sew the tragedy or comedy of life into their work, as they sit apparently safe and serene at home, yet are thinking deeply, living whole-heart histories, and praying fervent prayers while they embroider pretty trifles or do the weekly mending. End of Chapter 18. Chapter 19. Tom's Success. "Come, Philander, let us be a-marching, every one his true love a-searching," would be the most appropriate motto for this chapter, because, intimidated by the threats, denunciations, and complaints showered upon me in consequence of taking the liberty to end a certain story as I liked, I now yield to the amiable desire of giving satisfaction, and, at the risk of outraging all the unities, intend to pair off everybody I can lay my hands on.
Occasionally a matrimonial epidemic appears, especially towards spring, devastating society, thinning the ranks of bachelordom, and leaving mothers lamenting for their fairest daughters. That spring the disease broke out with great violence in the Shaw circle, causing paternal heads much bewilderment, as one case after another appeared with alarming rapidity. Fanny, as we have seen, was stricken first, and hardly had she been carried safely through the crisis when Tom returned to swell the list of victims. As Fanny was out a good deal with her Arthur, who was sure that exercise was necessary for the convalescent, Polly went every day to see Mrs. Shaw, who found herself lonely, though much better than usual, for the engagement had a finer effect upon her constitution than any tonic she ever tried. Some 3 days after Fan's joyful call, Polly was startled on entering the Shaws' door by Maud, who came tumbling downstairs, sending an avalanche of words before her. "He's come before he said he should to surprise us. He's up in Mamma's room and was just saying how's Polly when I heard you come in your creep-mouse way, and you must go right up. He looks so funny with whiskers, but he's ever so nice, real big and brown, and he swung me right up when he kissed me. Never mind your bonnet. I can't wait." And pouncing on Polly, Maud dragged her away like a captured ship towed by a noisy little steam tug. "The sooner it's over, the better for me," was the only thought Polly had time for before she plunged into the room above, propelled by Maud, who cried triumphantly, "There he is! Ain't he splendid?" For a minute everything danced before Polly's eyes, as a hand shook hers warmly, and a gruffish voice said heartily, "How are you, Polly?" Then she slipped into a chair beside Mrs. Shaw, hoping that her reply had been all right and proper, for she had not the least idea what she said. Things got steady again directly, and while Maud expatiated on the great surprise, Polly ventured to look at Tom, feeling glad that her back was toward the light, and his was not. It was not a large room, and Tom seemed to fill it entirely. Not that he had grown so very much, except broader in the shoulders, but there was a brisk, genial, free and easy air about him, suggestive of a stirring out-of-door life, with people who kept their eyes wide open, and were not very particular what they did with their arms and legs. The rough and ready travelling suit, stout boots, brown face, and manly beard changed him so much that Polly could find scarcely a trace of elegant Tom Shaw in the hardy-looking young man who stood with one foot on a chair, while he talked business to his father in a sensible way, which delighted the old gentleman. Polly liked the change immensely, and sat listening to the state of Western trade with as much interest as if it had been the most thrilling romance, for, as he talked, Tom kept looking at her with a nod or a smile so like old times that for a little while she forgot Maria Bailey and was in bliss. By and by Fanny came flying in, and gave Tom a greater surprise than his had been. He had not the least suspicion of what had been going on at home, for Fan had said to herself with girlish malice, "If he don't choose to tell me his secrets, I'm not going to tell mine," and had said nothing about Sidney, except an occasional allusion to his being often there and very kind. Therefore, when she announced her engagement, Tom looked so staggered for a minute that Fan thought he didn't like it. But after the first surprise passed, he showed such an affectionate satisfaction that she was both touched and flattered. "What do you think of this performance?" asked Tom, wheeling round to Polly, who still sat by Mrs. Shaw in the shadow of the bed-curtains. "I like it very much," she said, in such a hearty tone that Tom could not doubt the genuineness of her pleasure. "Glad of that. Hope you'll be as well pleased with another engagement that's coming out before long." And with an odd laugh, Tom carried Sidney off to his den, leaving the girls to telegraph to one another the awful message, "It is Maria Bailey." How she managed to get through that evening, Polly never knew. Yet it was not a long one, for at 8 o'clock she slipped out of the room, meaning to run home alone and not compel anyone to serve as escort. But she did not succeed, for as she stood warming her rubbers at the dining-room fire, wondering pensively as she did so if Maria Bailey had small feet, and if Tom ever put her rubbers on for her, the little overshoes were taken out of her hands, and Tom's voice said reproachfully, "Did you really mean to run away and not let me go home with you?" "I'm not afraid. I didn't want to take you away," began Polly, secretly hoping that she didn't look too pleased. "But I like to be taken away. Why, it's a whole year since I went home with you. Do you remember that?" said Tom, flapping the rubbers about without any signs of haste. "Does it seem long?" "Everlasting." Polly meant to say that quite easily, and smile incredulously at his answer, but in spite of the coquettish little rose-colored hood she wore, and which she knew was very becoming, she did not look or speak gaily, and Tom saw something in the altered face that made him say hastily, "I'm afraid you've been doing too much this winter. You look tired out, Polly." "Oh, no, it suits me to be very busy," and she began to drag on her gloves as if to prove it. "But it doesn't suit me to have you get thin and pale, you know." Polly looked up to thank him, but never did, for there was something deeper than gratitude in the honest blue eyes that could not hide the truth entirely. Tom saw it, flushed all over his brown face, and dropping the rubbers with a crash, took her hands, saying in his old impetuous way, "Polly, I want to tell you something." "Yes, I know. We've been expecting it. I hope you'll be very happy, Tom." And Polly shook his hands with a smile that was more pathetic than a flood of tears. "What?" cried Tom, looking as if he thought she had lost her mind. "Ned told us all about her. He thought it would be so, and when you spoke of another engagement, we knew you meant your own." "But I didn't. Ned's the man. He told me to tell you. It's just settled." "Is it Maria?" cried Polly, holding on to a chair as if to be prepared for anything. "Of course. Who else should it be?" "He didn't say. You talked about her most, and so we thought," stammered Polly, falling into a sudden flutter. "That I was in love? Well, I am, but not with her." "Oh!" And Polly caught her breath as if a dash of cold water had fallen on her, for the more in earnest Tom grew, the blunter he became. "Do you want to know the name of the girl I've loved for more than a year? Well, it's Polly." As he spoke, Tom stretched out his arms to her, with the sort of mute eloquence that cannot be resisted, and Polly went straight into them, without a word. Never mind what happened for a little bit. Love scenes, if genuine, are indescribable, for to those who have enacted them the most elaborate description seems tame, and to those who have not, the simplest picture seems overdone. So romancers had better let imagination paint for them that which is above all art, and leave their lovers to themselves during the happiest minutes of their lives. Before long, Tom and Polly were sitting side by side, enjoying the blissful state of mind which usually follows the first step out of our workaday world into the glorified region wherein lovers rapturously exist for a month or two. Tom just sat and looked at Polly, as if he found it difficult to believe that the winter of his discontent had ended in this glorious spring. But Polly, being a true woman, asked questions, even while she laughed and cried for joy. "Now, Tom, how could I know you loved me when you went away and never said a word?" she began, in a tenderly reproachful tone, thinking of the hard year she had spent. "And how could I have the courage to say a word when I had nothing on the face of the earth to offer you but my worthless self?" answered Tom warmly. "That was all I wanted," whispered Polly, in a tone which caused him to feel that the race of angels was not entirely extinct. "I've always been fond of you, my Polly, but I never realized how fond till just before I went away. I wasn't free, you know, and besides I had a strong impression that you liked Sidney in spite of the damper which Fan hinted you gave him last winter. He's such a capital fellow, I really don't see how you could help it." "It is strange. I don't understand it myself, but women are queer creatures, and there's no accounting for their tastes," said Polly, with a sly look which Tom fully appreciated. "You were so good to me those last days that I came very near speaking out, but couldn't bear to seem to be offering you a poor, disgraced sort of fellow whom tricks wouldn't have, and no one seemed to think worth much. No, I said to myself, Polly ought to have the best. If Sid can get her, let him, and I won't say a word. I'll try to be better worthy her friendship anyway, and perhaps when I've proved that I can do something and am not ashamed to work, then, if Polly is free, I shan't be afraid to try my chance." So I held my tongue, worked like a horse, satisfied myself and others that I could get my living honestly, and then came home to see if there was any hope for me. "And I was waiting for you all the time," said a soft voice close to his shoulder, for Polly was much touched by Tom's manly efforts to deserve her. "I didn't mean to do it the first minute, but look about me a little and be sure Sid was all right, but Fan's news settled that point, and just now the look in my Polly's face settled the other. I couldn't wait another minute, or let you either, and I couldn't help stretching out my arms to my little wife. God bless her, though I know I don't deserve her." Tom's voice got lower and lower as he spoke, and his face was full of an emotion of which he need not be ashamed, for a very sincere love ennobled him, making him humble, where a shallower affection would have been proud of its success. Polly understood this, and found the honest, hearty speech of her lover more eloquent than poetry itself. Her hand stole up to his cheek, and she leaned her own confidingly against the rough coat, as she said in her frank, simple way, "Tom, dear, don't say that as if I was the best girl in the world. I've got ever so many faults, and I want you to know them all and help me cure them as you have your own. Waiting has not done us any harm, and I love you all the better for your trial. But I'm afraid your year has been harder than mine. You look so much older and graver than when you went away. You never would complain, but I've had a feeling that you were going through a good deal more than any of us guessed." "Pretty tough work at first, I own. It was all so new and strange. I'm afraid I shouldn't have stood it if it had not been for Ned. He'd laugh and say pooh if he heard me say it, but it's true nevertheless that he's a grand fellow, and helped me through the first 6 months like a brother as he is. There was no reason why he should go out of his way to back up a shiftless party like me, yet he did, and made many things easy and safe that would have been confoundedly hard and dangerous if I'd been left to myself. The only way I can explain it is that it's a family trait, and as natural to the brother as it is to the sister." "It's a Shaw trait to do the same. But tell me about Maria. Is Ned really engaged to her?" "Very much so. You'll get a letter full of raptures tomorrow. He hadn't time to send it by me, I came off in such a hurry. Maria is a sensible, pretty girl, and Ned will be a happy old fellow." "Why did you let us think it was you?" "I only teased Fan a little. I did like Maria, for she reminded me of you sometimes, and was such a kind, cozy little woman, I couldn't help enjoying her society after a hard day's work. But Ned got jealous, and then I knew that he was in earnest, so I left him a clear field and promised not to breathe a word to anyone till he had got a yes or no from his Maria." "I wish I'd known it," sighed Polly. "People in love always do such stupid things." "So they do, for neither you nor Fan gave us poor fellows the least hint about Sid, and there I've been having all sorts of scares about you." "Serves us right. Brothers and sisters shouldn't have secrets from each other." "We never will again. Did you miss me very much?" "Yes, Tom, very, very much." "My patient little Polly." "Did you really care for me before you went?" "See if I didn't." And with great pride Tom produced a portly pocket-book stuffed with business-like documents of a most imposing appearance, opened a private compartment, and took out a worn-looking paper, unfolded it carefully, and displayed a small brown object, which gave out a faint fragrance. That's the rose you put in the birthday cake. And next week we'll have a fresh one in another jolly little cake which you'll make me. You left it on the floor of my den the night we talked there, and I've kept it ever since. There's love and romance for you."
Polly touched the little relic, treasured for a year, and smiled to read the words, "My Polly's Rose," scribbled under the crumbling leaves. "I didn't know you could be so sentimental," she said, looking so pleased that he did not regret confessing his folly.
"I never was till I loved you, my dear. And I'm not very bad yet, for I don't wear my posy next my heart, but where I can see it every day, and so never forget for whom I am working. Shouldn't wonder if that bit of nonsense had kept me economical, honest, and hard at it, for I never opened my pocketbook that I didn't think of you."
"That's lovely, Tom." And Polly found it so touching that she felt for her handkerchief, but Tom took it away and made her laugh instead of cry, by saying in a wheedlesome tone,
"I don't believe you did as much for all your romance, did you now?"
"If you won't laugh, I'll show you my treasures. I began first, and I've worn them longest." As she spoke, Polly drew out the old locket, opened it, and showed the picture Tom gave her in the bag of peanuts, cut small and fitted in on one side. On the other was a curl of reddish hair and a black button. How Tom laughed when he saw them.
"You don't mean you've kept that frightful guy of a boy all this time? Polly, Polly, you are the most faithful loveress, as Maud says, that was ever known."
"Don't flatter yourself that I've worn it all these years, sir. I only put it in last spring, because I didn't dare to ask for one of the new ones. The button came off the old coat you insisted on wearing after the failure, as if it was your duty to look as shabby as possible, and the curl I stole from Maud. Aren't we silly?" He did not seem to think so, and after a short pause for refreshments, Polly turned serious and said anxiously, "When must you go back to your hard work?"
"In a week or two. But it won't seem drudgery now, for you'll write every day, and I shall feel that I'm working to get a home for you. That will give me a 40-man power, and I'll pay up my debts and get a good start, and then Ned and I will be married and go into partnership, and we'll all be the happiest, busiest people in the West."
"It sounds delightful, but won't it take a long time, Tom?"
"Only a few years, and we needn't wait a minute after Sid is paid, if you don't mind beginning rather low down, Polly."
"I'd rather work up with you than sit idle while you toil away all alone. That's the way Father and Mother did, and I think they were very happy in spite of the poverty and hard work."
"Then we'll do it by another year, for I must get more salary before I take you away from a good home here. I wish, oh, Polly, how I wish I had a half of the money I've wasted to make you comfortable now."
"Never mind, I don't want it. I'd rather have less and know you earned it all yourself," cried Polly, as Tom struck his hand on his knee with an acute pang of regret at the power he had lost.
"It's like you to say it, and I won't waste any words bewailing myself because I was a fool. We will work up together, my brave Polly, and you shall yet be proud of your husband, though he is poor Tom Shaw."
She was as sure of that as if an oracle had foretold it, and was not deceived, for the loving heart that had always seen, believed, and tried to strengthen all good impulses in Tom was well repaid for its instinctive trust by the happiness of the years to come. "Yes," she said hopefully, "I know you will succeed, for the best thing a man can have is work with a purpose in it, and the will to do it heartily."
"There is one better thing, Polly," answered Tom, turning her face up a little that he might see his inspiration shining in her eyes.
"What is it, dear?"
"A good woman, to love and help him all his life, as you will me, please God."
"Even though she is old-fashioned," whispered Polly, with happy eyes, the brighter for their tears, as she looked up at the young man who, through her, had caught a glimpse of the truest success, and was not ashamed to owe it to love and labor, two beautiful old fashions that began long ago with the first pair in Eden. Lest any of my young readers who have honored Maud with their interest should suffer the pangs of unsatisfied curiosity as to her future, I will add for their benefit that she did not marry Will, but remained a busy, lively spinster all her days, and kept house for her father in the most delightful manner. Will's ministerial dream came to pass in the course of time, however, and a gentle, bright-eyed lady ruled over the parsonage, whom the Reverend William called his little Jane. Farther into futurity, even this rash pen dares not proceed, but pauses here, concluding in the words of the dear old fairy tales, "And so they were married, and all lived happily till they died." End of chapter 19. End of An Old-Fashioned Girl by Louisa M. Alcott.